Good evening. How the hell are you? Yeah, you know what's depressing? Well, apart from it being Friday, that's always a good thing. When I'm watching my intro there, I realise how young I looked about 3 years ago and how fat and older I look. That's bloody depressing. Anyway, welcome to the Friday Waffle. It's the 27th of October. Now, for a wee change, I've got a topic I'm going to talk about. There's probably not going to be any questions or anything like that getting answered unless anyone wants to talk about it in the live stream. I'm going to be talking about a specific subject, but I'm going to invite along an old friend, the prodigal son. You might know him. How are you, mate?
Am I unmuted now? Oh yeah, I am.
You are unmuted, yeah. I thought, yeah. I think when you use StreamYard, even though you're not on the stream, I think it's still, I'm sure it still picks up the noise. Because there's been times in the past where I thought nobody could hear me and I was talking to Eva or whatever. So I just like to kind of mute people just in case. But then, of course, you do get the thing where you forget to unmute somebody.
Yeah, I'll take your word for it. The number of times I use this thing, yeah, it's not very often. Yeah. Before we start, can I make two points here?
Of course you can.
Right, point number one. This is the fourth Friday since you announced the death knell of the Friday Waffles, and this is the fourth consecutive Friday Waffle you've done since then. So there you go, point one, and
yeah.
Point two. Yeah, I'm missing the rugby to do this. So, but before anyone thinks that it's a major sacrifice I'm making, it's the third and fourth place playoff, which
Oh,
no one is interested in.
completely inconsequential. Is that England? Is it?
Yeah, England and Argentina.
Oh fucking hell! Aye. You do know that there's technology that exists that means you can record things nowadays and then you can watch it later on.
Yeah, but it's England, Argentina. I couldn't
Yeah.
give a monkey's toss.
That's interesting. So, were you not supporting England in the World Cup? No.
No, no, not at all. I'm half Welsh. My dad's a Welshman, and when it comes to rugby in the Northern Hemisphere, I'm all about Wales. I couldn't give a fuck about England.
Yeah. Aye. So who's when's the final? It's on. Is it Sunday?
Tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow.
Tomorrow is it? What time's it on at?
Good question. I've no idea. Probably 8 though.
Yeah.
Well, 8 o'clock will be the kickoff. The program will probably start at about 5. You get hours of all this just boring fucking waffle about fuck knows what. No one's interested. They just want to watch the game.
And we'll no doubt see that bloody drop goal for the 15th bloody time.
Oh, yeah, 15th. 15 millionth time.
Yeah.
I mean,
Did you actually? Did you watch that game live when it was on?
No, I was still living in Canada at the time, so I was spared that.
I suppose back then you couldn't actually watch. It's not like nowadays you've got the tip TV type nonsense. You can watch TV from anywhere in the world. But I think I remember watching it, and to see I was gutted was beyond. It was, yeah. I think half of the UK was gutted when he bloody dropped that penalty kick thing or whatever it is, drop goal thing.
Yeah, I mean, all right, the England fans were happy, but the rest of the UK were after his blood, So you see, if that weren't bad enough, right, it had to be Johnny Wilkinson. He who does that unbearably annoying, praying to get shafted up the arse before he does any of his, conversions or penalties. Why did he do that?
What was that all about? Yeah, I mean, he started it, and then what's the guy that kicks at the moment? The guy's he looks like him. He looks like the character out of bloody Doom. The sort of marine character. He's got the skull.
Yeah.
What's he called again?
Yeah, I can't remember his name. I mean, yeah, he's another cunt, but he goes through that irritating bloody whole procedure before. If you watch any rugby videos on YouTube from the 70s, they just place the ball down, couple of steps, kick it. That's it. Done in a matter of seconds. Now we need fucking shot clocks because they're taking so long.
Thing is, the standard of kicking nowadays is just mental, isn't it? It really is.
I don't know. You wouldn't have said that if you saw the England versus South Africa game
really?
at the semi-final. Jesus Christ, both teams were playing like shit that day.
Ah dear. So what time is it? So is the game on just then? We'll take it. The England game.
I think it is. Yeah, it's 8:10. So yeah, I think it started.
Oh, cool. Excellent. Like, listen, what we're planning to do, we're having a wee chat just 10 minutes before this. Lacosa and myself are going to tell you what was the best 8 and 16-bit home computer. If you've ever wanted to know that answer, sit with us for the next hour and a half. I've promised Lacosa he can get away at 9:30. We'll knock it in the head at that point. So if you want to know what was the best 8-bit computer, and was the Amiga really better than Atari ST? Stick with us for the next, 90 minutes, 80 minutes, something like that. So, what we'll do is, I mean, we could quite literally talk for hours and hours and hours because there were so many home computers. I mean, I think I've regaled this story many times before I even had a computer. Do you remember these? Well, I think there's still a thing on the TV. You get these. Is it monthly magazines, and you get a tiny little bit of the fucking Millennium Falcon, and you've got to buy it for 10 years, and eventually you can build a model which you could probably get for 50 quid on eBay. But Where's the fun in that? You remember these, yeah?
Yeah, I remember them all too well. Yeah, they're still going now.
Excuse me, I've got a bit of cold, by the way, so if I start getting a coughing fit. But anyway, yeah, I kind of digress. Back in I think it was 1983. It would be 1983 because it was before I got my first computer. There was a magazine called the Home Computer Course. In fact, let me see. I've actually
I
got.
had it.
You had it, yeah. It was.
Yeah, we used to buy that.
Wait a wee minute. I've actually got a. I've got it on PDF. Just let me find it. And I'll show you the actual page that I'm talking about. 8 magazines, multi-format. What was it called? The Home Computer Course. There we go. Home Computer Course, issue 1. These 2 pages are etched in my my brain. Right, let's share the screen. Present. It's been that long since I used StreamYard. I was actually struggling to figure out how I get the intro video in Havas as well. They've changed options as well. Right, hang on. Share screen, window. Boom, there we go. Right, there we are. That was the bad boy.
Yeah, that was it.
80 pence. Bloody hell, look at that. A double issue, no less. Double issue 1 and 2.
Yep.
God. Right, anyway, let's just quickly get to the bit. So my mum bought me this. And
I think I know the bit you're
yeah,
looking
there
for.
we go.
Yeah.
I got bought this magazine and I quite literally pored over these 2 pages for months and months and months, and my mum and dad eventually agreed that they would buy me a computer of some sort for my birthday. And obviously there's so many. I mean, how many is there? 1, 2, 3, 4. What's that? 8. So it's 16 different computers, something like that. I mean, the thing is, there was computers coming out. Is that all of them? Yeah, it is.
Well, it's all that's in that section. I mean, that's nowhere near all of the computers that were around at the time.
Aye. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, back in the early sort of 83, early 80s, there was quite literally computers coming out. Not quite one a week, but this is you walked into your local computer emporium, and this is what kind of you faced. What one did I go for? It's interesting. You look at the prices. Atari 400, 150 quid. Because you'd pay a lot more for that nowadays. So you had this magazine. Did you have this magazine before you had a computer?
Yeah, not for actually. I'm trying to actually. No, I don't think. I think we might have already had it before this mag came along.
Oh, really?
If this came out in '83, because I am pretty sure we got our 64 like really early in its run, so we might have already had it then. I can't remember for sure, but
yeah, I'm just trying to see if it tells you. What would it be? Page 2. Let's have a look. I'm sure anyone here tell us when this came out? Has it got a year in it anywhere? 1983. There you go. Orbis Publishing. So yeah, this was before. This was before I got my first computer. So yeah, I mean, I used to look at these 2 pages and it's like, what one would I like? Where the hell's it going? Hang on, there we go. Yeah, I mean, I was aware of the Atari because obviously there was a computer shop in my local shopping centre. It was an Italian guy, Ray Agostini, owned it, and he was an Atari dealer. And I used to go in there most Saturdays and just look at the games, look at the computer. The guy wouldn't let us actually play them. So I was aware of the Atari, but I mean, the BBC Micro, I wasn't aware of any of these other ones. I'd heard of the Commodore 64, but look at the price of that, £299. So how much would that be in today's money? 700 quid, something like that, maybe.
But knows. He gets as good as mine there. A fair whack.
So
I think we paid more than $299 for ours when we got our one.
Yeah, and if I remember rightly, you didn't even get your mum was tortured you. She got you a computer, but she didn't get you a tape drive.
No, there was no tape drive. It was just the computer itself. no software of any kind.
And how long did you have to wait until you got? Did you get it for your Christmas, or was it a birthday present, or was it just a?
Oh, bloody hell, I can barely remember. I don't think it was. It was like any, like, it wasn't like a birthday or Christmas or anything like that. I mean, it wasn't mine. Well, at least officially it wasn't mine. But let's face it, I did take ownership of it very soon after we got
Became
it.
yours eventually.
Yeah. But I mean, it was something that we definitely wanted, a home computer, and I think it just eventually it was like, okay, today's the day we're going to buy it. It was as simple as that. It wasn't like a particular event or anything like that.
Ah, so your actual, it was a family choice then. It was they actually what they were going to get.
Yeah, but because I was the only one who really knew anything about them, they did sort of leave the choice of what one to get to me, even though 83 I was 11, which was quite the surprise.
And how did you actually know about the Commodore 64 then? I mean, what was it? This magazine? Well, no, you're saying you had this before the you had your computer before this magazine came out.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I
Yeah.
did. I can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure I did. Well, I mean, everybody already knew about the Spectrum, and I mean, when you're going back those days, then the ZX81 and the VIC-20 were like the ones that everybody knew. But we'd heard about the Commodore 64. We knew it was better than anything else that was out at the time. But it was almost a spur of the moment thing as to us getting it, because for the longest time we were going to get the Atari 600 XL.
Was that out at this point, really?
It might actually, it may show that I'm getting my years wrong.
Yeah, I
I'm
don't
starting
know.
to think it might be 83 that we got it, not 82. But yeah, the 600 XL was out. Again, it was really new. Yeah, we were pretty much set on getting that thing. And it was almost like a last minute thing. No, we'll get the Commodore 64. And I think it's fair to say we made the right choice.
I think you made the right choice, definitely. I mean, I poured over this for months and months and months and months. I didn't know anybody with a Commodore 64 or a VIC-20, and it was, well, I think it was going to be either, well, it was going to be probably the Spectrum. That's what I wanted. There was the 16K one, which came in at a whopping £99, or if you wanted the full Booner, 48K, 125 quid. So my mum and dad, they were going to go to, where was it, Comet? Do you remember Comet?
Yeah, I remember them. Yeah.
I think it was like Lasky's. It was one of these kind of like, it was like a big warehouse place. They were always in industrial units. They were always in the outskirts of towns.
So you're mentioning Lasky's there. I'm pretty sure it was Lasky's that we got our 64 from. So yeah, I mean that was a fairly big name back then, wasn't it? I mean, long gone, but.
So yeah, they said, right, we'll go and get you a computer for your Christmas, but you're not coming. It's going to be a surprise. So I says, well, yeah, but make sure you get the Spectrum. My birthday came, and I opened it up, and I had that, the Texas TI 994A. I had one. I bought one game which I got in mail order. It was written in BASIC. And that was it. That was the only game I had for it. It was quite simply, you couldn't walk into. I mean, John Menzies. I was playing computer games before John Menzies were stocking games. It was only Ray Agostini's shop that had them. He didn't sell Texas games, so I had the one game which was complete bollocks. You use the cursor keys to navigate. I think it was the letter. Was it the letter V? And you had to avoid the birds, which were W's, and you had to reach the core, which was an asterisk. So that was your graphics, and it moved. It was like bump, bump, bump.
Yeah, I mean, I had a TI 99.4A as well.
Did you really? Aye.
Yeah, I mean, it had been out for a while when I got it, but I think it was a friend of my dad's. He had one, and he was getting shot of it, and I got it off him for like 25 quid. I just liked the novelty, the fact that it was a computer I hadn't used before, and so yeah, I was quite happy to get that for 25 quid. Again, no data, no cassette or anything like that. I had no games for it. So, but we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves here because, of course, the TI 99.4A was a 16-bit computer, not an 8-bit. So,
and what did it have? What differentiates it between an 8-bit? Then I never really fully understood that. But
well, it had a 16-bit processor. That's what differentiates it. I mean, it was a dreadful 16-bit processor, but yeah, I mean, it was 16-bit.
Have you seen some of it? Have you played Donkey Kong in it?
I've never played any Texas Instruments games.
I've completely changed my opinion of it. I used to tell people it's absolutely shit. You know, it was an awful computer. If I had known about the games that were out for it back then, I do now. It's actually a really. I think it's got a. I think it shares the same. Is it processor as the? It's not. Is it the MSX or is it the ColecoVision? And the ColecoVision was actually quite a. It was the kind of. It was a powerful console compared to like obviously the Atari 2600. But there's actually some really good games out for it. But anyway, yeah, the reason I said to my mum and dad's, right, okay, you got me that. Why did you not get me the Spectrum? He says, because this one looks nice. Look, it's beautiful. It's got the chrome and it's got a nice keyboard. And it's true, but, you know,
well,
I wanted the Spectrum.
Yeah, the chrome was just painted plastic, you know. It wasn't actually metal, you know.
Really? Yeah, so that was working. Yeah, that's back in the day. You had all these different computers. I mean, a lot of them. Let's have a quick look. I did own a Sword M5. I bought one of these. I don't know why. I've no idea why. It must. I don't know. It was one of the, you know. Sometimes as you get older, you think that you had a certain opinion about something or somebody said something, and then actually the reality was it didn't actually happen at all. For some reason, I always thought that this magazine said that the Sword M5 was really fast, and I always wanted to get one, but I thought it's a Japanese computer, I'll never own it. And then I bought one off eBay about, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, and then when I read this, I thought it doesn't even mention it's fast, so I don't know why I thought it was what I thought it was, but yeah, I mean,
well, you can tell they were a bit desperate for good things to say about it when its advantages include a power on indicator. I mean, yeah, there's high praise, isn't it? You know, fucking, yeah, that's a bit desperate, that.
I mean, my dad was absolutely right. He must have read this. This has got a typewriter style keyboard.
Yeah. Yeah, it's another one. They're a bit desperate there for positive things to say about it. You know, what's the advantage? I'm sure I could think of an advantage that the TI 99.4A had that's a bit more, you know, a bit more impressive than just the fact that it's got a typewriter style keyboard. Admittedly, I can't think of one at the moment.
No.
Maybe if I had long enough, I might eventually come up with something.
Yeah, possibly come up with one between us. But yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, there you go. What's it? The Sword M5. What was the advantages? Yeah, it's usually it's got a well constructed. Oh no, it's not saying it's got a well constructed power on the indicator. That's actually two features. It's well constructed, and it's got a light.
Yeah, there's a light that tells you when it's switched on. I mean, God, where did they come up with this technological breakthrough? Yeah, fucking that's pretty desperate.
Yeah, let's just have a quick scan at the other computers. Yeah, we're not going to talk about the Auric today. The Auric was one of these also runs. I think probably the best way to describe it. But from what I gather, I think it was quite a capable computer, but it just never really caught on.
Yeah, the Auric was I thought a pretty decent machine, especially when the Atmos came along. Had a much better keyboard. It was a nice looking thing as well. Actually, I was always a bit of a fan of the Auric. Yeah, I thought it deserved more success than it actually had.
The thing that put me off that one, whereas it disadvantages has limit. So is it has had reliability problems. You read that, and you're like, no, not interested.
Well, it wasn't exactly unique among 8-bit computers for that, was it? You know,
Yeah,
I don't
ZX81.
I don't actually remember the either Auric having any sort of like any worse reliability problems than any other machine at the time. So I don't know about that one.
You're probably right, actually. And one feature that the Auric had, which I thought was quite good, was you could have like I don't know the exact command, but in BASIC you could say like play sound kaboom, and it would play a sound effect. The actual sound effects had names, or play explosion, and it would play a specific thing. So that was quite good. And of course the Auric Atmos, that was like an upgrade of a kind of better keyboard.
Yeah, it did it. I mean, a lot of people always sort of like slated the Auric for its keyboard. I mean, all right, it wasn't great, but I've used far worse. But yeah, the fact that the Atmos had the proper sort of keyboard that we're familiar with today, yeah, it was obviously a big help there.
Yeah, I never actually saw an Auric. I've seen the Atmos, but never actually seen that one. The New Brain.
Well, it's the Grundy new brain, isn't it? I've never seen one in the flesh, so to speak.
Yeah, that ruled me out right away. Disadvantage is too complex for the beginner.
Well,
they were all too complex for the beginner.
I mean, later on in here, they've got the Jupiter Ace. I mean, that was, I think that was even more complex. Yeah. I don't really go along with that. The thing that I didn't like about the new brain, I could only really go by the photo there. 'Cause that's the only time I've ever seen one. I just thought it was a horrible looking thing, and I didn't like the keyboard on it.
It kind of looks like a VIC-20 after it's kind of yellowed a wee bit, doesn't it?
I thought it looked more like a sort of Spectrum style keyboard to me. I don't know if those keys are rubber or not.
I don't know. I don't think the picture's not. Nah, it's not the greatest picture, but yeah, there you go. The New Brain, £269. Bloody hell! Look at that. Expand to 2 MB.
Oh yeah.
Oh, holy shit!
Yeah, it cost a fucking fortune, but yeah, you could do it.
Non-standard sockets easily damaged. Who wrote this? I mean, so they're easily damaged more than a standard socket.
Well, the other thing is, I mean, what was a standard socket? There were so many different, different socket types on each different system. So, what was standard, let alone non-standard? That's quite a vague one. That.
Yeah, computers. Oh, hang on, that's what bloody alarm going off. Shut it up. The computers links now. One of my mates has actually got. He's actually got one of these. We had a discussion a while back, and he said that is the best 8-bit keyboard you can get. He says it's brilliant, really.
Yeah, I would go along with that. Yeah, the Lynx had a fantastic keyboard. It was mechanical. I remember. Yeah, I was. I say trying one out. I was, 10 print. Fuck off, you cunt. 20 go to 10. In the shops of that. But yeah, I always remember the keyboard on that one was great. The basic was painfully slow, but
what's interesting here, I can't even pronounce. I'll let you read that bit. There's the disadvantages.
What idiosyncratic basic? What does that even mean?
That's something you'd tell me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that not backing up what you're saying? It had a really pish basic.
Well, it was very slow. That was the only problem with it. I can't remember what
Uh,
the processor was that the Lynx used, but yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't a fast machine. It was also one of those. The manufacturers were one of those really snobby lot that kept saying, "No, this is not a game computer. We don't want games for this." And I could never
uh,
understand that because the computers that had the larger selection of games were the ones that were successful. So, it's why the fucking hell would you not want to have, some of that? So if you're designing a computer, surely what what you want to say is, yeah, this is good for games. Yeah, we want games programmers to jump on here.
yeah, kids would be all over it. I mean, to be fair, when I've been watching some of these early, like the computer program with Ian McNaught Davis, who's sadly gone, they absolutely frowned upon games. Computers were for boffins and to run spreadsheets and to turn your lights on. They weren't for games. I think there's one episode he actually refers to as stupid games. But what did he know?
Mm,
I think
yeah.
it's Live Sinclair not see that as well. If that not micro live, what was it called? Micromen. Have you seen that?
No, I remember Micro Life, but yeah, I don't.
Have you never seen Micromen? It was a one-off BBC program, and it was what's the hell? What's the name of the guy? The guy out of the office who also played the main character in The Hobbit, Martin something or another. What's his name?
I know the Martin Freeman, I think.
Aye, that's him. He played Chris. What was the name of the guy that started Acorn? Chris something or another. He
Not
was
a clue.
employed. He was employed by Sir Clive Sinclair. What the hell? What's that bloody stupid? What is that annoying quiz show that's on BBC? Alexander Armstrong. That's it. You've never seen Micromen?
No.
Well, you need to
No, I
watch
don't
it.
know.
I think it is on YouTube. It's basically it's about an hour and a half long. It's how Sir Clive Sinclair came to be and how the BBC. So that was a spoiler, by the way. How the BBC became the computer that they picked for the computer program. Worth watching. Alexander Armstrong. He plays. After 5 minutes, you believe you're actually looking at Sir Clive Sinclair. But yeah, he did actually say that he didn't want people to play games with it. But
Oh yeah, I mean that's a
yeah,
well-known quote of his. Yeah, saying he didn't. But I mean, Clive Sinclair did that quite often. You'd hear him say stuff, and you'd think, okay, you've engaged the mouth before engaging the brain. Why on earth would you say that? I remember he was looking to go back into the computer industry again. He was bringing out well, he said that he was going to be bringing out a new computer, which, I mean, I think we're talking around sort of 2004, 2005, around this sort of time.
really.
And the interviewer was asking him stuff, and it all sounded like it was going to be okay. Then they said, "Is it going to have internet connectivity?" And he said no. And straight away, no one was interested in the thing.
2005, he made that
Yeah,
statement.
yeah.
That's bloody mental.
No, it's not going to have
Uh,
internet connectivity. Oh, are you fucking serious? So, yeah.
that is mental. Yeah, Jupiter Race, as you said, it was a fucking. I've seen one in the flesh. I've never tried the keyboard.
Yeah, I've seen one. I've never had the chance to actually use it, but I did see one.
It just screams cheap, doesn't it? It's got that cheap plastic. But the
I mean,
irony being, it's probably the machine out of this whole 2 pages that probably goes for the most amount of money. But there you go.
well, it was a bit of a commercial flop, wasn't it? The decision to, not. It didn't come with basic, did it? It came with fourth.
Fourth. There you go.
which, yeah, as it says there, it's definitely not the best, language for beginners to try using. So, I mean, it says there, summary, good for those who wish to experiment with Forth. Well, that was a fucking expensive way of doing that. I mean, you could buy, the whatever the software was that allowed you to, compile in Forth for all of these computers.
Right.
Buying
Right.
just buying just buying, a computer purely so that you can ponce about trying to program in Forth. No.
I mean, I never used anything other than when I did my computer O grade. It was basic on the BBC. I never tried any of these other languages. What was the difference with Forth? Was it just it did the same, but it was different type thing? Was it?
I'm really not the one to ask. If Jim Plays is here, he'd be the one to ask. He's the one who knows about coding and shit like that.
It's interesting what they say here. It says it's good for those who wish to experiment with Forth, but then if you look above, it says unreliable keyboard.
Well, the keyboard was identical to Spectrum's, wasn't it? You right away down to using the rubber sheet. So
the membrane thing. Yeah. But anyway, listen, we're going to move on. So that was a kind of plethora of Colour Genie. Yeah, another one you heard about. Commodore 64 Dragon, and then if you were really sad, you got the Epson HX20, which had like a 2 centimeter screen.
Yeah, that was the portable thing, wasn't it?
So, right, let's get rid of this. So I think for the purpose of this video, I think what we'll do is we'll pick what was probably the main runners for the 8 bits. In fact, what we should maybe do is we'll just concentrate on 8-bit machines, because I think there's, excuse me very much, there's a whole video for 16 bits. So I think we'll just concentrate on 8 bits since we've actually got less than an hour anyway. So,
well, I can condense the 16-bit whole video down to it's the Amiga. There you go.
Spoiler, right, I'll need to cut that bit out. Yeah.
Right, 16 bits done. Right, on to the 8-bit. Yeah.
So what about the Texas? Would that get second place possibly? Texas T199, whatever it is.
What, as a 16-bit? So you put that second ahead of the Atari ST.
Would the Texas actually go in that category, do you think?
Well, it is a 16-bit computer, machine. So I suppose you would have to, yeah.
Right, we'll tell you what we did say this was going to be the definitive 8-bit and 16-bit. You've gone for Commodore Amiga?
What, for 16-bit?
16-bit, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot of nostalgia for the Amiga, but I mean, it was the best 16-bit computer.
Let me think. Atari ST, Commodore Amiga. There we go. That's it, folks. You've heard it here. 2 200% the Commodore Amiga. I mean, we'll chat about it very, very briefly. I had an Atari ST. It was the upgrade. Well, I thought it was going to be an upgrade for my Commodore 64. I saw a screenshot of International Karate. It's not the one that Archer McLean did. It was a different version. And I remember seeing a screenshot of it, and I just thought, fucking hell, look at that. And I was at college at the time. I did daily release for work. And I showed it to the guy sitting there. He went, fucking hell, that's incredible. It was like the colour, and it just looked amazing. And Ray Agostini, the computer shop that I mentioned earlier, he got an Atari ST. I think he had the ST, sort of the 520 and the 1040, which was like the bigger memory.
Yeah,
and
I remember the 1040.
Yeah, he used to play all the Psygnosis games like Pteropods. You remember that one?
Yeah, I'm reluctantly going to admit that in the beginning I didn't mind Pteropods. It's not a game that brings you sort of like, rushing back to it these days, but back then it was okay.
It was, yeah, he used to play it constantly. He used to play as Pteropods, and I didn't really understand. I could actually imagine that would be a game that you would actually have played. You would probably quite enjoy that game. I don't know why. It's strategy.
Yeah, I got very close to completing it, but yeah, never did.
Yeah, it's actually quite simplistic, isn't it? Is it almost like a
Yeah,
kind of a
it's
shooter? Is it really?
it's yeah. To be honest, it's yeah, it really it is just a shooter. There's a little bit more to it, but it's yeah, it's a lot more simple than its appearance would have you think. They tried to make it look really complicated. The fact that it used keyboard, mouse, and joystick. But that was done purely because they could. It
Aye,
really
aye.
didn't need to be done that way.
I think that was a Psygnosis thing. They brought out the god awful Barbarian. Aesthetically, it sounded great. It looked brilliant, and then it was a sideways scrolling kind of beat 'em up type, slash 'em up, whatever you want to call it. And you could use the mouse, the keyboard, and the joystick. I mean, as you say, they did it. They shoehorned the mouse in just because it was new technology. People were going to want to play a sideways scrolling beat 'em up using a mouse. That's obvious.
Yeah, I mean, it gave you the chance to sort of like practice using the mouse. So, in that regards, it did sort of do something sort of right. But yeah, the novelty wore off very, very quickly.
But getting back to the reason I mentioned that game was it going from the Commodore 64 to that. I think fucking hell, listen to that. It's got like real. It had real lightning sound effects. There was like any crack of, or was that Barbarian? Aye, Barbarians at the start when you see them going to cut the chain, you get a
Yeah,
flash of lightning.
yeah, with that very unconvincing animation when he cut the chain. Well, Pteropods used the exact same sound effect as well.
It did actually, yeah, because you get the wee, you see the thing kind of going like that. It goes, brr, and then the wee guy runs out,
Yeah,
or does he run in and then
yeah, he
it lifts
runs
up?
into it. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, as from an 8-bit owner, a Commodore 64 owner, this was a step up. It's like fucking hell, it can play real sounds. And I remember Ray Agostini had this disc, a floppy disk, or to my younger viewers, a 3D printed save icon, and it had what the hell was it? It was a Mike Oldfield song. Was it Foreign Affair or something? Foreign Affair. Da-da-da-da-da. It was a female vocal, and he put this floppy disk into the Atari ST, and it played like 10 seconds of this song, and our tiny minds were absolutely blown.
Yeah, I remember I had quite a few Amiga public domain discs that did a similar sort of thing. Yeah,
The thing is, that's what you wanted when you had lashed out all this money, or in the case of me, I was paying up like 15 quid a month. You wanted all this. You wanted to justify your purchase and show your pals are playing Drop Zone, but you're playing real sound effects in your Atari ST. But then the graphics looked amazing. I swapped my Atari. I swapped sold my C64. I mean, I sold it. I had a disk drive. I had literally hundreds of original games, disk drive games, or floppy disk, I should say. I had a disk drive, I had a flash, not a flash card, a freeze frame cartridge, joysticks, everything, full collection of Zap. Sold it for 100 quid. But it's easy. It's easy. In 2000 and where are we? 23. Had to check the date there. It's easy in hindsight and look back and go, why did you sell it? Back in 1986 or 1987, whenever it is, I got it. 1988 actually. I didn't want that. I wanted something new. I wanted to upgrade to a 16-bit computer. So I was, as soon as somebody offered me 100 quid for it, fucking take it. That'll be my deposit for my Atari ST. And it was, fantastic. Bought Barbarian, also bought Arkanoid, and I heard the music on it, and I thought, wait a minute, that's almost just a really poorly coded tune. Until I realised that was what the Atari ST sounded like, and part of me died that day when I found out that the SID pissed all over the Atari, my £400 new purchase, and it just couldn't live up to the C64 SID chip.
No, not at all. It had the AY chip in it, the same chip that the Amstrad and the Spectrum Plus
Is that
3
the
or
same?
the 128. Yeah. So, you know, they really cut corners in order to get the ST out on the market
I think you mentioned that
faster
actually.
than the Amiga. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the audio was certainly one area where they did. That was one of the two biggest problems with the ST. The other one was that it was so processor centric. It had no dedicated hardware of any kind. So if you were going to be playing a game that was using like vector graphics, whether it was wireframe or filled, yeah, it would do that just fine. But whereas like with even if you're comparing it to the 64, with the 64 had hardware sprites, I forget what the Amiga used, but again, it had hardware acceleration for the visuals. The ST didn't have it, and the game that really does show that is Shadow of the Beast. I don't know if you've seen the Atari ST version of Shadow of the Beast. It is horrific.
I played it last week on my stream, and it was the first time. It was the first time that I'd actually seen. I didn't even know it existed for the Atari ST. Visually, oh pardon me, visually like the intro and all that. It's got digitized sounding. This is great, and then the game starts and the scrolling.
Yeah, the scrolling is horrific,
yeah.
and like even before the scrolling starts, the actual like visuals they're almost monochromatic. They don't have anything like the color, or the color depth that the Amiga version has.
Yeah.
So yeah, when you see just how bad, the visuals were for that game there, and it's not like it was particularly long into the ST's lifespan. That really did show just how badly the ST compared to the Amiga. I mean, there really wasn't any comparison.
Aye, as I said, I didn't even know that existed, and it's interesting you mentioned that game because I said last Sunday I was asked to play it. And I was like, holy shit, this is terrible. And what I did, I played it for like a couple of minutes, and then I loaded up the Amiga one, and it's like night and day. Absolutely.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is night and day. I mean, the game's shit no matter which version you play, but at least it looks and sounds good on the Amiga.
What do you mean we forgot to add bloody playability? Was that not your job or your graphics? Oh fuck it, just stick it out there. Put a decent soundtrack. Nobody'll notice a complete lacky gameplay.
Trouble is, it worked. I mean, Shadow of the Beast sold by the bucket load. The trouble is, everybody who bought it, or just about everybody who bought it, within a couple of weeks, they were bored shitless with it.
Aye.
So, of course, when Shadow of the Beast 2 came along, people were rather understandably a bit hesitant. And then when Shadow of the Beast 3 came along, people were like, no, I ain't falling for that shit again. Which was, doubly annoying because by that time they actually got it right. It was a decent game.
Aye, it was. The thing about the original was, I mean, I remember seeing it for the first time, and it was probably the most impressive looking game for the time. And even now, I was at the computer club on Tuesday, and I just loaded up the Amiga, and I was just listening to the music because the music on it, the soundtrack for it is phenomenal, and it's visually impressive. And if you were going to try and sell it to somebody, you would make sure that Shadow of the Beast was running, and if they attempted to play it, you go, no, don't touch the joystick.
Yeah. I had a one of the public domain music discs, and it was just the Shadow of the Beast soundtrack. So I just stopped playing the game altogether. And if I wanted anything to do with it, I would just load that up. That was much better.
Who did the music? Who did the music in the Shadow of the Beast?
Oh, Dave Whittaker.
Was it really?
Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah, he really sort of like burst onto the scene on the Amiga. He was about the only SID musician who made the transition to the Amiga, and he did it really well. Um, it could be argued that Joran Tell and Charles Deenan, they did some great pieces of music for the Amiga, but not very many. But so many of the other SID musicians, yeah, they didn't take to the Amiga at
Chris
all.
Hulsbeck, obviously the one that I know he's famous for is the R-Type, which is a nice piece of music.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course, yeah, he's definitely up there. But, I mean, he did more music for the Amiga than he did for the 64, so
I
it's
didn't know
sort
that. Yeah,
of
there's
understandable.
a couple of the Graham there, Geezer Games, yet David Whittaker LFC. David Whittaker's music in Shadow of the Beast is easily the best thing in the game. Yeah, without a shadow of doubt. I didn't realise also Whittaker also did Xeno on the Amiga as well.
He did both the Xenon games, yeah.
Because I'm not a particular fan of David Whittaker's 8-bit stuff. Very plinky. I know we're going off topic here. It's pretty plinky plonky. Not my bag at all. But I mean, when it comes to the Amiga stuff,
it's very hit and miss. His 64 stuff. I think his good stuff is fucking great. But he did do a lot of quite forgettable stuff as well. You could actually say that the same applies to the Amiga as well. He did a lot more really good stuff on the Amiga, but yeah, there was still his fair share of forgettable guff on there
good
and all.
stuff. Yeah, but so getting back to the Atari ST, part of me died when I realised that I was no longer going to be able to listen to Monty and the Run and Wuzzball and all that kind of stuff. And as soon as the Amiga became affordable, I think it was at the 10, not the, what do you call it, the Amiga 8500, with the, I mean, it was like that shape, and the modulator stuck out about the same.
Yeah,
you needed a fucking massive desk to actually have the thing.
Yeah, that's right. We had a very early one. We had, my one had a Kickstart 1.2. The only other person I know who had a Kickstart 1.2 Amiga 500 is Jim again, if he's still here. But yeah, everybody else I knew, if they had an Amiga 500, they all had 1.3.
I know Del Boy. He had the Amiga 1000, which is obviously a nice machine. So yeah, I got, as soon as I could, I traded the Atari ST in, got the Amiga, and promptly forgot all about the Atari ST. So if to summarise very quickly, is there any thing that the Atari ST does better than Amiga apart from it having a MIDI interface?
Well, that's the thing that everybody always says, isn't it? Oh, it's got the MIDI interface. That was never a priority for me, so no is the short answer to that. I can think of a couple of occasional games that were better on the ST than they were on the Amiga, but that was just purely down to how well the games had been coded or how badly they'd been done. It was nothing to do with like one machine being better than the other in some way.
What was the game I was playing again? It was on the live stream. Well, I think you asked for it. No Second Prize. I don't know whether it's my memory playing tricks, but the Atari ST one was bloody phenomenal. It was really silky smooth, and it made it that wee bit easier because it was, I don't know, 60 frames per second or something.
I don't know if it would have been 60. I think it was either 50 or 55. No Second Prize. I think the two were practically identical. Geezer Games has mentioned one there, Star Glider. Now that was definitely better on the ST than it was on the Amiga. Partly, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, but partly because the audio on the ST version was so much better than the Amiga version, which I think is more an illustration of how bad the audio was done on the Amiga version rather than how good the ST one was.
So I think, in fact, I was actually going to say it was originally programmed for the Atari ST, but my mate's dad had an Amstrad. It was I don't know what the hell it was. It wasn't like the CPC. It was a green screen Amstrad thing, and he actually it had a kind of a bespoke disc. It wasn't like a float, but it was similar to a 3.5 inch floppy.
It was a 3-inch disc, not a 3.5. I think you'll find. Yeah,
it was kind of more robust. It wasn't as kind of floppy. You couldn't bend it.
Well, I mean the 3.5 inch floppies weren't exactly, you weren't going to be bending them about or anything. You tried doing that, you just snapped the thing like I did with my Yolanda disc. Yeah,
but he had came out in that. But yeah, I remember getting Starglider on Atari ST, and it was phenomenal. So do you think it was it originally programmed by, was it Jez San?
Jez San, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I know it was in. He also did Starglider 2 as well. Although that one, the Amiga version, was a lot better than the ST. Although I couldn't stand Starglider 2. I never understood the appeal of that one.
Really? I thought coming kind of being a sort of Mr. Dangerous, an elite dangerous fan, you would have quite liked that, or is it really nothing like it? No.
Nah, not really. But yeah, I couldn't. I just couldn't get into it at all. I found it very forgettable.
But anyway, yeah. So once I got the Amiga, I mean, there was really the only game that I'd say, fucking hell. And I remember buying it. I bought it for the Atari ST, and then about a week later, I traded it in, and obviously that was 25 quid game gone, and it was Oids, which is a really good game. It's quite jerky and all that, but it's actually a really good sort of thrust type clone. Have you seen that one?
I'm familiar with it, but I never played it.
Yeah, it's like Thrust. You've got to go down, shoot things, pick things up. It's a great game, and it never got released on anything else other than Atari ST. So apart from that game, there was nothing that made me want to go back. The Amiga really, unfortunately, the Amiga suffered from like the MSX Spectrum to MSX. It was a straight port. So you played one shit game in Atari ST, and the Amiga one was just the same. Maybe had slightly better colours. And then once they realised that more people, because I think at that point, more people had the Atari ST than the Amiga, but then that soon changed.
Yeah, it didn't last, no.
Everybody was trading their bloody Atari ST in, and obviously they got to grips with it, and the Amiga went from strength to strength. So, Amiga, best 16-bit machine.
Oh yeah.
What about the Archimedes? I mean,
that was 32-bit.
Oh, that's what it was, right?
Yeah, it was a RISC chip. That one. That's why it's such a pain in the arse to try and emulate it. The processor isn't x86 architecture. I just add something here where I was saying that I absolutely agree with one thing that Geezer Games said regarding Starglider. I absolutely disagree with the one he's just put here. Captain Blood is better on the Atari ST too. Oh no. No, I cannot go along with that.
You did a kind of a good kind of playthrough Captain Blood, didn't you? I think you actually tried to explain to me how the game works.
I started doing a playthrough, but I didn't get very far in it. I did do a review of it as well. I love the game. It's one of those. You got to know what you're doing, obviously. But I thought that was a great one. It was. Well, I say was. It still is. It's unique. I've never played a game like it before or since. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that one. But it's got to be the Amiga version.
Obviously, Mr. Amiga himself, Geezer Games. Graham's put out some stonking games, including obviously Devil's Temple, amongst Super Sprint and all that kind of stuff. So he knows the architecture, and it's interesting that he actually thinks that the Atari ST version of Captain Blood's better.
Well, the reason I think the Amiga version is better, and I can't believe it's the reason why a lot of people say that the ST version is better. The Amiga version, all of the different alien races that you encountered, they all had their own sort of like unique audio, their unique sort of sound. with the ST version, they all sounded the same, and it was supposed to be this sort of language that had been written into it. In fact, if you listen to it, no, it doesn't seem to be the case at all. It's just picking from about like what sounds like half a dozen different sort of sounds. It's just putting them in random order, and I just don't like that. So I prefer the Amiga version because the audio with the different like alien creatures you encounter and you're communicating with, it just really added to the atmosphere of it.
Yeah, obviously Graham was easy to impress because what he's saying here is the Jean-Michel Jarre music in ST is miles better than the Amiga one. So he was sold with the music, and that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to get you in with the title screen and the music.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I already had the Zuluk album, so if I wanted to listen to it, I would have just put the album on. So yeah, I thought the music was good, but yeah, if I wanted to listen to that, I'd just go and put the album on.
Of course, before we move on to the 8-bits, the classic example of impressive title screen and music, which you could not do on a Commodore 64, but the game was absolute dog shit. It would be Crazy Cars. It had the guitar solo in the
I thought the music for Crazy Cars was horrific.
But it was impressive, though. I mean, it
was awful. Jesus Christ, no, there was no redeeming features for Crazy Cars at all, other than the 16-bit versions, which were identical. I'm sure the Amiga one was just a straight ST port, but the 16-bit versions were infinitely better than the Commodore 64 version.
Did it come out in the 8-bits? I didn't know. Yeah. Did it really? Aye.
Well, I've done reviews of the 64 version of Crazy Cars and Crazy Cars 2, and they both ended up in the Supreme Shit Game database playlist, so that tells you how good they were.
What would be the worst if you had to pick?
2, because it was practically identical with like one or two very minor visual changes. But other than that, they basically released the same game again and was asking for another 10 quid for what you got.
But what was the worst version, the C64 or the Amiga or the Atari ST?
Well, C64 was the worst.
Was it really?
Yeah, but
I've never seen it. It must be bad.
Yeah, that is indicative of just how shit the 64 version is, because say the 16-bit versions, they did not have a single thing going in their favour, including the music.
Whoever thought, let's make an outrun killer, and what we'll do is we'll add in an additional game mechanic which will win all the young kids and make us buy that. Will allow you to jump.
Well, but you weren't. You weren't jumping by choice, were you? It would jump up in the air if you hit another car. I remember hearing something. I don't think this is true, but something I was told was the reason they did that was if they didn't show the car being damaged at all, then they didn't have to pay a license to either use the name or use the the visual representation of it. So that's why they put it in there. The car wasn't getting damaged at all, so they could use it in the game without having to pay any sort of like license or any licensing.
Because you had things like Volvo and bloody Audi and all that kind of thing, I'm sure.
No, all it had, I think you started off in a Merc, then I think it went up to a Porsche, then a Lamborghini, and I forget what the last one was. I mean, I can't think anybody in their right mind would have played it for long enough to have found out what the fourth car was.
I never got beyond the Merc, so that tells you what I thought of it.
Yeah, it's a monstrous shit pile, that thing.
So, yeah, that's it, folks. The Amiga is officially the best 16-bit computer, bar none, unless you want to play OIDs. Right, 8-bit computers. I think what we need to do is agree what computers we're going to talk about, the good and the bad points. ZX Spectrum. We can't not include that.
Okay.
Commodore 64, that's a given. BBC, did that sell enough to include that?
Yeah, I suppose you got. Yeah, I suppose
so.
you got to.
Amstrad, and we can't not talk about the Atari. I don't think there's any other machines. Is there anything else in there we need to
Oh yeah,
computers
there
links?
no, it's not the computers links. No, you got to throw in the Commodore 128 because I can tell you already what I'm going to choose as my number one.
Okay, that's right. C128. Right, we'll start off just in the order I've written them.
Yeah, there you go. You got the BBC Master 128 as well. That wasn't. Well, would that be considered one that was for home use?
Yeah, I suppose. It's too bloody expensive. Then again, we're kind of giving out spoilers there. So, right, ZX Spectrum. Did you have much kind of exposure to it at all? Did you own one? Did any of your pals own one?
I didn't own one, but just about everybody else I knew did. And
did you partake in like the I always laugh when people talk about the playground wars. I was a growing adult when I bought my Commodore 64, so I was working. So that whole thing about swapping cassettes and the playground kind of passed me by. But I know you're somewhat younger than me, so did you partake in the playground wars? My Commodore 64 is better than your Spectrum?
To a degree, yeah, I did. But I was not like particularly vociferous about it, you know. The worst thing about it, of course, is that these days it's far worse than it ever was, you know, back then. I mean, these days, if you know.
Oh yeah. I think you're talking about the arguing. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you say, oh, I thought the Spectrum was shit, and you get this absolute deluge of like, oh, fuck off, you cunt, you don't know what you're talking about, and all this fucking bollocks. It's like, oh, for fuck's sake, it's a computer that's like, you know, 40 years old. Fucking get over it. You know, it infuriates me, all that bullshit. I can't be doing with it, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, the ZX Spectrum. I mean, have you played one? Have you ever actually played a Spectrum?
Yeah, of course I have. I think just about everybody from like our generation did, you know.
Yeah.
I
mean, what right? Good things. What can we come up with about the Spectrum that was good?
Well, you can go first.
Thanks for that one.
Hang on, you're trying to draw up a list of things that are good about the Spectrum. Yeah, I ain't going first on that one. God, fuck, you might think of anything.
I mean, well, firstly, the games. I mean, I didn't have a Spectrum. I said I got to Texas and I had the Commodore 64, and I always remember a mate from school. We got talking. Oh, you got a computer yet? What have you got? I've got a Spectrum, and I'd never seen this. I'd seen a Spectrum, but I'd never really played. I'd never played it. Never touched one or anything. And I remember going to his house, and he loaded up a game, and I was actually quite shocked at how shit it looked. The color clash, and I'm like, fucking hell, because being a C64 guy, you know, at least the graphics were clear. They might have been a bit on the blocky side, but I was genuinely, and it wasn't a snobbery thing, I was actually quite shocked at what it looked like. I thought, fuck's sake, I can't remember what game it was, but it was like Color Clash Central.
There were plenty of games that would do that. I just correct Geezer Games on one thing there. Valhalla also came out for the 64. That wasn't a Spectrum exclusive. So it's the only one of that list that he's written there that you know, that applies to. The rest are all... Actually, no, because Jetpack also came out for VIC-20, didn't it? But yeah, the other 1, 2, 3, 4...
Cavalon's one of my favourite Commodore 64 games. The great version in the C64.
Is that the one that was released by Ocean?
It was, aye, and it's a wee maze, and
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
Camelot. You see the wee guy going in and rescuing the fair maiden, or sorry, I should say the triangle with flailing sticks coming out the side, which I think was meant to be a kind of princess. But yeah, yeah. I mean the what was I talking about? Yeah. Anyway, once I kind of got to actually play the Spectrum, there was a lot of games that, as a C64 owner, I was jealous of. I mean, you couldn't not look at Underworld, not Underworld. I didn't like that game. You couldn't not look at Night Lore and go, "Fucking hell, that's impressive." I wish my Commodore could do that.
Trying to remember. Obviously, I know the title. I'm trying to remember
Yeah,
remember the game.
Night Lore was the
Does it play
isometric
like
3D.
Oh, I can't stand isometric 3D games. So as soon as you said that no, it turns me off it.
Yeah,
I mean, stuff like Attic Attack. Yeah, that was a classic one that was good. I mean, there were good games on the Spectrum. There's no denying that. Geezer Games again as so well. A Renegade on the Spectrum, absolutely pistol over the 64, and
yeah,
even more so Target Renegade. That was a great game on the Spectrum. I detest the 64 version.
really, I've quite liked that actually, but
Uh, oh yeah, I suppose yeah. Elite on the Spectrum, it ran smoother than the 64 version. It didn't look better, but yeah, it was. It moved faster. It moved a lot smoother. Of course, the Spectrum and 64 versions both pale into insignificance compared to the BBC. The BBC
yeah,
original was by far the best one of as far as Elite goes. So yeah, I mean the Spectrum did have some games that were decent to play, and if the games were good enough, I could ignore the shit audio, and I could
wacky
ignore
colour.
the horribly fucking gaudy colours that were just too bright. And then you got the other extreme where they would be like monochromatic, and Target Renegade again, prime example of that. It looked crap, and the audio was non-existent, but the game itself was so good, you could forget about the shit stuff in it.
Yeah. The thing I liked about I mean, it was, I can't remember, it was a bloody Bedrooms to Billions, I think it was. Somebody described the Spectrum. What made the Spectrum great was it was just a keyboard and memory, and because there was no real restrictions, there was no specific chips, whatever. It was just like, there you go, there's a chunky memory, there's a processor, I can get on with it. And so it pushed people to let's be honest, it pushed people to get games running on it, which quite simply should not be running on it. Stuff like, whilst I'm not a big fan of the game, like Chase HQ in the Spectrum is technically it's brilliant. It's got the hills, it looks great. That should never have been possible. There's a lot of games like that, and it was quintessentially British as well. So you had some of I mean, like Manic Miner. I love Manic Miner, and I know Panther UK goes on about the new Commodore 64 version. I'm sorry, if I'm going to play Manic Miner, I'd rather play the original. Some brilliant games. Stuff like bloody. I think a lot of the Monty games were better on the Spectrum. There was bizarre games. There was one, I can't remember what the hell it was called. And because I think am I right in thinking the Spectrum's processor was it twice as quick as the C64, or maybe not quite as much, but it was
No,
faster, I think.
no, it wasn't. See, this is another thing that Spectrum, former Spectrum owners constantly say. Yes, it was clocked faster, but it couldn't do as much per clock cycle as the 6502 that the 64 had, and the proof in that is I think the Spectrum was clocked at 4 megahertz. Now the BBC Micro had a 6502 processor that the 64 had, But whereas the 64s was clocked at 950 kilohertz, at least it was in Europe and the UK, the BBC Micro was clocked at, I think it was 1.65 megahertz. So still, as far as like sheer clock speed goes, it was less than half the speed that the Spectrum's Z80 was running at. But it absolutely annihilated the Spectrum's processing power, because the 6502 was a much more efficient processor. It's like you go back to, you remember when AMD brought out the Athlon 64 and Intel brought out the Pentium 4 Prescott, which was an awful processor, but it was clocked much faster than the AMD one. But the AMD processor was absolutely pissing all over it, and it was exactly the same then. So yeah, the whole megahertz myth is, it's meaningless. If the processor can't do, can't carry out as much per clock cycle, then I mean, it's not that the Z80 processor was utter shit. No, of course it wasn't. There were far worse processors out there than that. But the 6502 was the better processor. It's just that the 64s was clocked a lot slower. To save money, because if it had been clocked at the same speed as the BBC, the thing would have cost a fucking fortune. And B, the 64 had a lot of dedicated hardware, so it didn't need a blisteringly fast processor, because so much of what it was doing, especially as far as gaming went, the processor didn't need to do anything. The graphics was being done by the VIC-2, the audio was being done by the SID. The processor was just, doing everything else in the background.
I suppose it did largely depend on what type of game it was. I mean, I think there were certain games in the Spectrum that were definitely better, that were faster. I mean, sort of like 3D,
games.
3D games and that kind of stuff were better.
If games that were using vector graphics were faster on the Spectrum, because that was one of the few areas where raw clock speed did actually make a difference. So with vector graphics it did, and for reasons I could never figure out, 3D isometric games were better on the Spectrum than they were on the 64. I was never a big fan of the 3D isometric games anyway, so that didn't bother me too much. I didn't have too many of those games. I think the only one that I sort of liked, I didn't mind The Great Escape, but I think that was about it.
I had a copy of it. Was it Fairlight? But it was absolutely, I don't know how many frames per second. When the guy started to move, it went boom, boom, boom. That was the Commodore 64 version. It was fucking horrendous. It looked nice, but it played as slow as shit. It really did. But then obviously on the flip side, when you get arcade games, I mean, something like Uridium or Drop Zone, these could not. Yeah, I know there was a version of Uridium on the Spectrum, but no comparison. You could not get a game like Drop Zone. Listen to me, like I know, but I'm entitled to my opinion. I don't think you could have a game as fluid as Drop Zone on the Spectrum.
I've never seen, or at least I don't think I've ever seen the Spectrum version of Uridium playing. I've not heard too many good things about it, but I don't think I've ever actually seen it run. But yeah, it's got its fucking work cut out to try and compare to the 64 version. Well, I know you don't really like Uridium that much, to put it mildly. But no one could look at Uridium and say, "Oh, that looks like shit." I mean, it visually at the time, it was one of the best looking games out there,
I mean, I was lucky enough to be down at Zap Live a couple of months ago, and Andrew Braybrook said himself that Uridium was way too difficult. And I was standing watching him playing it, and he was fucking dying as well. He says it's a memory game. You need to remember what bits to kind of avoid and all that kind of stuff, you know. But
if you're going to play Iridium now, you want to play Iridium Plus. That's the version to
is that the one you don't have to fuck about? You can just land when you get to the end of the. Yeah, I have played that, and I can actually get to level 2 in that one. So there.
Level 2.
There, yeah.
Okay. I'm thinking
I think I might have got beyond that, but
I was going to say I was thinking like level 7 or 8 or something. You know. Oh, I did well. I got level 2. Okay, yeah.
That, to be fair, I think I did get. Yeah, I have played it, and it's definitely better. Anyway, we're going way off topic here. So yeah, the Spectrum did have obviously the processor allowed it to, because it ran faster. Certain games, vector games, isometric type games did play better. I think a big selling point of the Spectrum was the sheer number of games and the fact that they were bloody cheaper as well than the Commodore 64.
Yeah, I mean, sheer number is all well and good, but I mean, what percentage of that sheer number was decent? You know, how much of that was just complete fucking horseshit?
Yeah, that's true. But there was a vast. I mean, if you went into like your local WH Smith or whatever, there was always a lot more Spectrum games. I mean, over the period, Commodore caught up with it, yeah. But.
Yeah, I mean that I think was always the case. No matter where you went, the selection of games for the Spectrum was always far greater than that of the 64.
Yeah, but no, and I suppose I know one of the big. We're trying to determine what. Well, not really. The prices are relevant because that's that's not going to make it the best 8-bit machine at all. I mean, it was affordable. It was definitely affordable, so that made it popular. But
that was the number one reason why it sold so well. The price of the thing. The 64 was not a cheap machine, so there were plenty of people who they would never admit it, especially not today with all this borderline tribalism that you get now. No one will ever admit that they bought a Spectrum because they couldn't afford a 64, but you can bet your life there was a good number that did that.
I'm just looking at the comments. Phil Smith says 58%. What is that referring to? Did we ask for a percentage or something?
When I was saying, what percentage of the Spectrum games were actually any good? Mind you, I then said what percentage. Mind you, I also said what percentage of them were absolute shit. So I don't know if he's pointing out the good ones or the shit ones.
Yeah, but to kind of summarise the Spectrum, there was a massive amount of games. They were cheaper, and when I spoke to Gary Bracey in my live stream a couple of years ago, I asked him why was the Commodore 64 games always £1 more. He says because we did. He says there's no reason for it other than we just thought fucking charge them more because they've got more money, and that was from Ocean Software itself. That's why they did it. But
one thing though that's just occurred to us, if we are we're trying to find the best 8-bit computer, is the price really relevant?
That's what I'm saying. It's not relevant. It's not. I mean, it was the reason that it was popular, but it's not relevant. We're not interested in the price of the thing. So
we're just looking at it in terms of the technology.
Yeah, because if that was the case, probably the Z80 would win hands down. Not enough said. Right. Anyway, we've kind of gone on about the Spectrum quite enough. Right, let's move on to the fucking. This is going to be a long one. This By the way, how are we doing for time? We've got 5 minutes. Are you all right to run on to 10 o'clock?
Yeah, I think I'll just about survive it. Yeah.
Or are you desperate to get and see how much England are getting pumped stupid?
No, my luck, they're fucking winning, aren't they?
Right, Commodore 64. Where do we start? I mean, we'll talk about the games to begin with.
Well, it's the machine that has the greatest game of all time. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
Well,
let's. We're not going to talk specifically about that, but yeah, Impossible Mission is your favourite game. It's not my favourite game. My favourite game, probably well, in my opinion, the most impressive game. I mean, Uridium technically, it just looks phenomenal. I mean, even when you get the high score, the speed of it, and one of the most impressive bits of that game for me is when the mothership comes on the screen, and then your little ship comes out, and then it goes, and it doesn't just kind of go. It's almost blurred. I don't know what Andrew Braybook actually did, but it moves so fast and so smooth. It's almost like blurred.
I don't remember it looking blurred, but
again, it's maybe one of my childhood memory that's kind of playing games. But it's a phenomenal looking game. But Whizball to me is a technical masterpiece. Impossible Mission, obviously, it's
yeah. I mean, those two. And those two in particular they're always the best example of, like, the best version of any game is always the first one, the original one, because all the conversions just, for whatever reason, they just don't cut it. I mean, we'll take Whizball because that's one that we both actually like. The visuals on the 64 version, they absolutely nailed it. They got it absolutely spot on. The same with the audio, and I'm not a big fan of Commodore 64 sound effects, to be honest. I mean, you compare Commodore 64 sound effects to something like the VIC-20. VIC-20, I think, just sounds so much better. But when it comes to music, obviously, there's no comparison. But yeah, with Whizball, they got the audio right. Sound effects and music. And then the most difficult part of all is actually getting the gameplay right. And again, they absolutely nailed it. They just got everything right with that one.
Yeah.
But you look at any of the other versions and none of them compare. The only one that I think comes close to the 64 original was the freeware version that was made for the PC.
Yeah, I've played that, yeah.
Actually, I do quite like that one. It's not as good as the 64 version, but that's no surprise. But it is vastly better than the Spectrum version, the Amstrad one, which doesn't even fucking scroll; it's flip screen. And
really, is it? Oh, bloody hell!
And the less said about the god awful 16-bit versions, the better.
Yeah, that was that guy Peter Johnson, I think it was, that programmed these. Again, looking at if you were to get a cassette inlay and look at the C64 version and look at the Atari ST one, you go, that looks nice, the Atari ST one. But yeah, I don't know whether I mean, what was it? It was John Hare that did all the graphics. Chris Yates did the programming. These guys did the original game. It's obviously going to be, I mean, if you're doing a conversion of an original, then the conversion, it's almost impossible for the conversion to be better, because if it becomes better, then it's almost a different game. Can it make any sense?
I can't say I agree with that. I can't think of any instances where that's happened, but I'm sure there have been some. But I mean, if you're going to convert a game from one computer to another, obviously there are some limiting factors. You can't really change anything, because otherwise it does become a different game. And again, the Amstrad version of Whizball, the prime example there, it doesn't scroll. Turning it into a flip screen game, that was a ridiculous idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the Amstrad can't do scrolling to save its fucking life, but Jesus Christ, surely there was a better option available to them than the one they went with.
You're just going to alienate. I was just going to say you're going to alienate half of the Amstrad people, but then that means it's only one person. But there was a There was a version of what was the Amiga Pinball Dreams. Apparently, it came out a few years ago. On the I've never seen it. It came out on for the Amstrad, and apparently the scrolling is like silky smooth. So obviously through the passage of time and internet and that, they've been able to kind of more power out. It's the same with the isometric games. People thought that the Commodore 64 could not do isometric 3D. Well, somebody went and converted Night Lore, and it's better than the Spectrum one. It's got the colour. It moves just the same speed.
Okay. To be honest, I pay zero attention to the Amstrad, so yeah, I'm the last person to ask about when it comes to that thing.
But anyway, the C64, yeah, we're going off topic a wee bit. That, phenomenal. It probably had just slightly less games than the Spectrum, but a massive collection of games, and of course the Commodore 64, and I always say that to people that going about how good the early Commodore 64 games, your Fort Apocalypse and all that. I always say to people, if you enjoy that timeline of games, go and get yourself a bloody Atari. They were making games like that. I mean, there's no comparison between Fort Apocalypse is one of my favourite games. The Atari ST one pisses all over the C64 one. There are so many good games, early games that a lot of people probably don't even know anything about. Stuff like, what was that game that I showed you and you like it now? Dino Eggs. That was a real early game, 1983.
Oh well, I remembered. I remembered. It's Dino Eggs, but yeah, we'll gloss over that. Well, it's dinosaur eggs, so yeah, I'm pretty sure Dino Eggs is the title. Yeah, I knew of that game before you showed us it.
Oh, did you?
But it was one of those that I sort of vaguely remembered it in the back of my mind, and then I happened to stumble across a video of it somewhere, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that fucking thing. Yeah, that was one of those where you ignore the visuals because the game was that good. You didn't care that visually it wasn't quite all that. It wasn't awful. There was some pretty good moments in there. I think the animation when you mutate into the spider, I thought it was quite well done.
A great game, but yeah, my point is there was a lot of great games that came out in the early days. And obviously, pretty much all the Spectrum games, the later Spectrum games, came out in the Commodore 64. So, from a game's point of view, you were absolutely spoiled for choice. The sound, obviously, where do we go with the sound? We'll keep music separately. I mean, the sound effects on the Commodore 64.
The thing with the 64, the sound effects I always thought were a bit too clean and a bit too crisp. You wanted that sort of like muddy, not completely crystal clear sort of like audio for sound effects, which is why the VIC-20 I thought sounded so good. There were plenty of VIC-20 games that I remember. It sounded like you're in an arcade when you heard them, because it's not so much the actual sound effects themselves, but it's the overall sound quality. It wasn't like crystal clear. It was a bit muddy and a bit sort of like fuzzy, but that's what added to it, and it really did make it sound like it was something from an arcade hall.
It's almost like comparing a CD with a vinyl type thing. It had a richer kind of sound. It wasn't as clean. I don't know.
Mind you, what are you saying is the better format there?
Oh no, I'm agreeing with you. I do agree. Well, I like vinyl. I think it's got a richness that you just don't kind of get with CD. But no, I mean the VIC-20. I never had a VIC-20. I didn't know anybody that had one. Since making YouTube videos, I've obviously played a lot of VIC-20 games, and there are some staggeringly good games. I mean, it's That would be an also ran the VIC-20 or a near contender. I mean, that was a great machine.
Well, the VIC-20 would never be in the running for the best 8-bit machine, no. But I mean, it was still fucking good. For
and
its time.
The fact that when Jeff Minter made what's that new game that he made based on it? It was like an urban myth. It was a game that never actually got released. Somebody will tell me what it was. He released it about 6 months ago on Steam. Can't remember the name of it, but anyway, he used, or was it that, or was it the game? Was it Moose Life? It might have been Moose Life actually. Anyway, it was one of the recent games that came out, and Jeff Minter actually used the VIC-20 to make the sound effects.
No, and well, believe it, I know Jeff Minter was a big fan of the VIC-20. I think a lot of his games that came out for the VIC and for the 64, he would say that the VIC was the better version.
Yeah, I think anyone that likes a bit of Grid Runner,
yeah, that's always that's the definitive example with it. VIC-20 Grid Runner is by far the better version.
There's Colin Jones is saying the game that never came out because it was meant to be pish, but Jeff then resurrected it, and I bought it, and I can't for the life of me play it. I know that'll come as a surprise to people.
I'm shocked.
Akai, how do you pronounce that? Akai R.
That'll do. I've never heard of it, so.
Moose Life, that's what I thought. Yeah, Moose Life's a kind of in the screen kind of shooter. He created the sound effects with the VIC-20, so that says it all. But I mean, the Commodore 64, I think it was fair to say it was capable. I mean, was there any of these other machines that we're going to talk about, BBC, Amstrad, Atari, Spectrum, that had better sound effect capability? Probably not. Not
better. I mean, the 128 obviously had exactly the same, so it was every bit as good. But
of course, sorry, the 112. I've got that written off to the side there. There we go. Commodore 128. Yep.
But as far as 8-bit machines go, nothing beat the 64.
Sorry, Jim's just saying, thank Christ the C16 plus 4 are not up for discussion. That'll be coming in our sequel, the worst 8-bit computers, but anyway.
Well, I mean, the Commodore 16 had a great colour palette. That's about all it had going for it, but yeah.
Aye, so yeah, C64. I mean, the sound effects were, they were passable at the time before the other machines came along. In fact, even well, let's rule out the VIC-20. Was there any 8-bit machine had better sound effect capability than the Commodore 64, or was that probably the best, but not particularly good?
If we're ruling out the VIC,
Atari 8-bit.
I'm not familiar with the Atari 8-bit systems. I'm not familiar enough to be able to say about those. So I would have to say it'd be the 64.
Aye. Yeah, I mean, it was
64 stroke 128. Basically, whenever I say 64, I'm also throwing in the 128 there as well.
Yeah. Obviously, one thing that we've kind of omitted to mention, I noticed, but we're not going anywhere, folks. I noticed everybody's spoiling alert. They're coming up with their own bloody their own lists. These lists don't matter. We're going to tell you what. Never mind you making up your own mind. We will tell you what the best machines are. Commodore 64. Was there any of these other computers? Could they do another visitor? Stay a while. I mean, these sound effects that we could all remember loading up Impossible Mission and just thinking, fucking hell, did I just hear that out of Commodore 64? And even now you put it on, it is just incredible. Was that the SID chip that was making that?
Yes and no. I don't quite know what the process was that got them to do that, but I mean, the SID chip was basically handling all of the audio, so yeah, I guess it was. It was also taking advantage of a bug that was in the SID chip, which they then fixed when they brought out the 8580 version. Yeah. But yeah, we won't go into that. I mean, the speech in Impossible Mission, it was one of like two things when I first saw the game. Bearing in mind I was only 84, so I was 12. I remember, yeah, the first time I saw it, and obviously the first time I heard it, I was thinking I didn't know a computer could do that. And it wasn't that I didn't know a Commodore 64 could do that. I didn't think a
Yeah.
computer could do that. Because around that time, with the exception of like the Laserdisc arcade games, all of the arcade games that had speech in they all sounded like, Gorf and Wizards of War and stuff like that, so it was all very robotic and all
Yeah.
this. And then suddenly this thing came along and you'd never heard anything like it. So you had that along with, like, the staggering animation on the main sprite in that game. It was just, it absolutely blew me away. So, yeah, it was one of those moments. It was a moment I never had it with the Amiga, and it's one of the reasons why I don't have the nostalgia for the Amiga that I do for the 64. I never had any of those moments where I saw something on the Amiga thinking I didn't think a computer could do that.
Yeah.
But I had, like, 3 or 4 occasions where that happened with the 64. It just, every time I thought, well, this is as good as it gets. And then something else would come along and push it that bit more.
It was just the C64. Sorry, I just gave my dog a fucking fright there. The C64, it kept coming along. It kept surprising us with what it could do. And yeah, I mean, was it Berkeley Sound Systems or something? That was the company that did the speech, and that they did what do you call it? They did
that one, Beachhead 2. They did as well.
Yeah. Medic.
Yeah, and again, it was absolutely crystal clear. It wasn't robotic. It sounded like sounded like a man. Even had the fucking accent, So I mean, it was unreal. I mean, the thing is,
yeah.
Oh, go on.
No, I was just going to say in Beachhead 2, when you've got the knife throwing, when the guy falls, he goes, ah!
Well, it was exactly the same as when you fell through the floor in Impossible Mission, wasn't it? So that was actually a bit that they reused. I think that was the only part that they did, though.
Yeah. But so I mean, we'll add that bit into the sound effects. So yeah, I don't think, and if anyone can tell me differently, I don't think any of these other there was any other 8-bit machine that could have speech of that quality. Then of course there was Ghostbusters as well, and that was.
I didn't think the speech in Ghostbusters was of the same quality as
no.
I mean, it was good, but it wasn't up to the level of Impossible Mission and Beachhead 2.
But then you compared it with like the Spectrum version.
Yeah.
It's just a muffled mess.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that. Then of course we can't not talk about the Commodore 64 music. Listen, I need to go for a piss. Do you want to take a couple of minutes to go for a piss?
Okay, yeah, that might be a good idea. That, yeah.
Yeah, right. Don't go anywhere, folks. We're halfway through. Yeah, we're going to reveal what was the best 8-bit machine. So we will be right back in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, we might get this finished by midnight.
Still there, folks? Hey, we've still got a few people in. Excellent. Right, okay. Move that to there. Yeah, listen, thank you very much for everyone that's tuned in tonight. It's always appreciated. Excuse me. Fed and watered? Something like that.
Well, I took a leak, so yeah, you know, that'll do.
If I didn't go for a piss, we were going to have to do a quick summary in literally 2 minutes. So I thought I'll just take advantage and go to the toilet and let Archie out as well. So anyway, yeah, before we move, the next part of the C64, which we can't not mention, talking about the sound, is obviously the music capability, the SID chip. I'll let you start. I mean, where do we go with that? The fact that we've actually arced out an entire kind of playlist of probably, I don't know how many hours of SID music we've played collectively with Panther.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. We've done 11 videos on the thing, so you know that kind of says it all, really. I think.
I mean, how did the music in the C64 kind of evolve? I mean, when you look at the early games in the Commodore 64, one thing you would never have said was, "Oh, the sound's great." The sound was just, burp, 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 and it would play things like Green Sleeves, or it would play classical music, and it was no better than, I don't know. It was no better than an Atari 2600. When do you think? Well, in fact, I know the answer, but I'll let you tell the viewers. What was the sort of first bit of music you heard that you went, "Holy fuck"? I think I know the answer, but you'll put me out of my misery anyway.
Well, I mean, there were two that you know I heard them, and within a week I had the game, and it was purely because of the music. The first one was Ocean Loader 1, which I kept calling Transformers because that was the first game when I heard it. So to me, it was always the Transformers loading music. So that was one.
Tell you what,
absolutely.
Before you go into your second part, what was the first game? Transformers, you said it was, yeah.
Well, it was the loader. It was Ocean Loader 1, really. The actual music within the game itself was okay. It was a Fred Gray piece, but I mean, it was the theme to the television program. I mean, you know, if you liked it, then I suppose you'd say, oh yeah, this was great. I didn't rate it all that much, you know. So it was all about the loading music. Then that was the reason why I bought it. You know, the game. I remember seeing the game, thinking, well, it was okay, but you know, but I couldn't not have that music on my computer. So you know, I had to get the game because I had no idea that loader was going to be appearing, like, you know, about fucking 36 more games. You know, although the bulk of them I think used Ocean Loader 2 rather than Ocean Loader 1.
Yeah.
I didn't think Ocean Loader 2 was as good.
Yeah.
As far as music that was actually in game,
or the title track, whatever.
Not loading music.
Yeah.
One of the first that I really remember, not a good game, I think it would be Rambo. Because I think I had Rambo before. I think you're expecting me to say Crazy Comets.
Not one much earlier than that.
Much
A
earlier
certain
than...
game by was it Argos or something? Was the name of the company?
Oh, of course. Yes, Alien. I'd forgotten all about that. Yeah, because that,
Yeah,
I think that was early '85, wasn't it? That one.
it was
And
an early game. Yeah.
I mean, I thought the game was great. I still do. I know you're not
No,
a
no,
fan
no, no,
of
no,
it.
no. That was a game that you showed me how to play, and that was one I went away and played, and I came back and said that it's actually good. I understood how it worked when I first played it. I could hear all these noises, and I didn't understand how to play it. Then I can now play it, and I have actually played it since then. But like yourself, I remember it came in quite a big box. It was like
Yeah,
a
okay, yeah, the big old
A5. It
clamshell
was
box.
probably
Yeah.
not too unlike that size
Oh,
kind of
I think it's
box.
bigger than that.
Maybe it was, and
It was a fair size. Yeah.
was it, I don't know. I don't know why I'm thinking. Was it green in color? I don't know why.
Well, it had the film poster on the on the front, didn't it? So
That would be
I mean,
why.
it had the egg with like the green sort of like light coming out
Kind
of
of
it.
glow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But so when you first heard that, when you loaded the game, did you know that? Well, you wouldn't have known it had that. You bought the game based on the fact that it was based on a film.
Well, I bought the game because, well, actually, the game was bought for me. I think it was either a birthday present or a Christmas present or something.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was bought because I love the film. I had no idea what the game would actually be like, so it was a bit lucky actually that I thought the game was great, you know. But yeah, the music was, you know, I'd not heard. I think it was another one of those moments where, you know, I'm listening to this, thinking I didn't know a computer could do this because, like you say, although it's cliched as fuck to say, oh yeah, you know, it was always like Greensleeves and all that, but there's no getting away from it. That's what the music was like, certainly in the early days, you know, like '83. Even if you had music at all, you know, it was always going to be something pretty basic. And then this thing came along with like really heavy use of filters. I didn't even know the fucking chip had filters, you know. So yeah, that could well, yeah, I think that was the moment when it started because I had that before I had the likes of Transformers and Rambo and
Yeah,
Crazy Comets and that.
that was obviously Rob Hubbard and all that, and Martin Galway. I mean, the and it was only after we did the Sid show, and you mentioned Aliens, that or Alien, I should say. I went, fuck, I completely forgot all about that. And at the time when I bought the game, I'll be honest, I loaded it up, and the sound was like, wow, this is incredible. And I have to say, when I started the game, it looked like it was a type-in game, and I just, oh, the game's pants, and I never really went back to it. But I did load it a couple of times just to hear the music. The music was just like, it's something I'd never seen. It had gone from plinky plonky piano type stuff to something like that. I was like, I didn't know this was even possible. And then, like yourself, I think, in fact, when I got when I started getting copied games from, I did buy a lot of games, by the way, but I had a lot of copies as well. When I started getting games from like America,
Just on that subject, I'll tell you something. This is absolutely genuine. I did not have one single copied game on my 64.
really,
Not one.
That's quite an honourable thing. Actually, was there a particular reason for it, or?
Yeah, because I could never get copied games to work properly, so yeah, I gave up with it. I'm more than made up for it on the Amiga, but yeah, I didn't have any copy ones on my 64.
So you're just a pathetic pirate then?
Yeah, I was just not good at it. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
you're
the only reason. Yeah.
But yeah, when I got the early, excuse me, the early games that came out in America, and I was playing them before US Gold came along and said, "Oh fuck it, these are actually quite good. Let's bring them across to the UK." So I don't know where they were coming from, but I was playing games like For Apocalypse and what else was there? Blue Max and Drelbs and Seamus and all these kind of games, and they had like Yankee Doodle Dandy and Star Spangled Banner, and again, this computer playing music pieces that was actually recognisable. And I remember saying to my mum and dad, who had absolutely zero interest in computers, and I was listening to this, Mum, and well, that's really good, son. She thought that was quite impressive, and then just as I'm talking there, I remember one game in particular, which was an old game, and it's got one bit in it. It's like, wow, it was a Seamus by Synapse Software, and it's not the game itself. It is in the game. It's the Synapse Software logo. It kind of goes zoop, and it's a kind of lasery sound, and it's like really impressive. But yeah, the early kind of American games had recognisable tunes which weren't entirely shit. Then, as you said, I think in fact the first game that I got was Daley Thompson's Decathlon, and it had loading music. And
that was something I was going to mention. When you were talking about the US Gold ones. To be honest, I was never that impressed with the loading music in with the US Gold release or distributions. But the first time I heard loading music, and that was another moment where it's like, I didn't think a computer could do this. It's playing music while it's loading the game. Fuck you, what? And Daily Thompson Decathlon was the first one, because I remember when I got it. That was another one I got for my birthday. When the music started, I was thinking, oh, right, does that mean, the game's loaded? So I stopped the tape. And of course, it knackered the whole thing up. And that's when I realised, hang on, it's playing this music while the game is still loading. And that just blew my mind. I didn't think it was possible on a computer to be able to do that. What's Geezer Games saying here? No copied games. Outlook Koza, are you Kieran Hawken in disguise? I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, but I have no idea who Kieran Hawken is. But no copied Commodore 64 games. But like I say, it's purely because I was shit at getting copied games to work. So it wasn't through lack of trying, I can tell you.
I think Kieran Hawken, I've heard his name mentioned in dispatches. I think he's I don't know him. I don't know him. I wouldn't know him to look at. I think he's a bit of a cunt. That's all I know. I don't know what the copied games part of it's got to do with it. But anything I've heard about that guy has not been particularly nice. Anyway. What were you saying there? Yeah. Anyway, so you're talking about. What were we talking about? I've completely lost the train of thought.
Loading music.
Yeah. That's that. As you say, that was just something you think, fucking, how is that even possible? The thing is, I don't think there wasn't any loading music. Did loading music only come along when turbo loaders were a thing? I think they were. Right?
Yeah. It was Novaload, was it, that first brought in loading music?
Aye. And the very first game that I remember to feature loading music that I bought was Revenge of the Mutant Camels. I think it was Nova Load. But then, of course, Encounter had the original Nova Load with the kind of squiggly noises before it broke into the Star Spangled Banner. And so I mean, you could almost say you could actually do a thesis on Commodore 64 SID music, from like the early stuff to like the Yankee Doodle Dandy, and then there was stuff that was actually not shit, like Daley Thompson's Decathlon, the Ocean Loader, and then it just got better and better and better and better. So I mean, who do you think produced the first SID tune that people stood up and took notice of, and what would you say that tune was?
Well, I would imagine, I would say it was Paul Clancy when he did the Alien music. It's got to be one of the first. I mean, you're talking about like the US Gold ones and that. I mean, yes, okay, it was loading music, which was fucking unreal, but I didn't think the music was that great. I mean,
Yeah.
Okay, it was playing tunes I don't like, which doesn't help, but I did think it was a pretty sort of like, it had a really harsh sort of sound to it, you know.
You wouldn't listen to it for fun. Put it that way. You
No,
wouldn't put
no,
it. You wouldn't record it and put it on your Walkman when
no,
you're
no,
walking to school.
not at all. Although, I mean, it certainly helped with, you know, making the loading times pass. So even though the music wasn't that good, games were. It felt like they were loading a lot quicker than they actually
Well, it always
were.
had the timer as well, and it used to show you coming soon, Spy Hunter, and it used to have the wee scrolling bit going along the bottom that tells you what.
Yes, yeah, that's right, and yeah, the countdown thing there blocks the load. I think the first one I had that had that, the first like US gold one was Zaxxon,
Oh, aye.
and I mean that's not a bad game to you know, have in your collection. I've always been a Zaxxon fan.
Good conversion. One game that, I mean, you were talking about Paul Clancy doing Alien. Yeah, that was a even now. It's a impressive. I mean, it's quite a short bit of music, but it's it's really atmospheric. It's perfect for the game. But then so that came and it went, and then it was just like shit music again for quite a while.
I
But one,
don't, I don't know if I'd go that far. It wasn't like a one-off. I think a lot of people heard that and realised they had to up their game because it wasn't long after that that you got Daley Thompson's Decathlon, which I'm assuming was Galway. And it didn't take him long to really up his game. And I think he was the first, like, big sort of like Sid musician because I don't know if he started before Hubbard, but Hubbard's like really early stuff does sound quite basic actually. Whereas Galway, I think it's more to do with like his actual like music style. It always had something extra there that you know you just didn't have in any other games at the time. So even his early stuff was already like you know quite noteworthy.
yeah, interesting. Graham's mentioning Bruce Lee and Zorro. Bruce, I talk about early games and it was all plinky plonky, and Bruce Lee was the perfect example. The title music to Bruce Lee was just like, oh, it's a bit of music. Your Spectrum can't do that, but you weren't going scream from the rooftops. Listen to Bruce Lee. It was a bit of music. You knew what it was trying to do, but you weren't. It wasn't really impressive.
Yeah, Bruce Lee was all about the actual gameplay there, wasn't it?
Yeah,
It was real sort of like no frills in every other department, but the gameplay they nailed. And of course, at the time when that was what mattered.
Aye, big license. What one game that I don't know if it came out before or after, or the funny thing is when I can sort of like I can look back at my Commodore 64 experience and say, oh, there was that and there was this and there was that. The reality was, I mean, it seems to me like, oh, it was 10 years. The reality was, it was probably like 3 years, which considering when I think back, bloody COVID was like 3 years ago. I mean, it's actually a tiny little bit of my life, but it seemed like a lot longer. You know, a month was a lot longer than it is now. It's like a blink of an eye. But one game that, and to this day, and it's one that I did pick in one of the SID shows, and I still think it's a beautiful piece of music, and it was Flight Path 737 by Analog Software. Is it Von Dow? DOW, I think it was. It's a really short little bit of music, and it's beautiful.
Doesn't mean anything to me, that one.
No,
I don't know the game.
I'm not going to play it in this because StreamYard's absolutely pish when it comes to replicating sound. But so then, obviously, and I think the answer I was looking for when I was trying to prompt you, but you've obviously picked something different. The game that the magazines took note of and they went, fucking hell, this is incredible, and they got like 98% was, what do you call it? Not Money on the Run. Oh, Thing in a Spring, Rob Hubbard. That was the first SID tune that you don't like it, I don't really like it, but it was technically it was quite impressive. It was something we'd never heard before.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, as far as the music goes, I'm not a big fan of Thing on the Spring music, and I absolutely detest the game. But
With you in that one.
yeah, as a technical exercise, yeah, you could see that there was something like pretty special there, but it wasn't really the kind of music style that sort of like it didn't grab me. So it I appreciate the music for what it was. It was possibly the game that started the whole like Sid music in a major way. It already had like some steps up there, and then this sort of like really took it up another gear. But yeah, I hate the game with such a passion that I kind of wish it never existed.
I'm with you. I mean, Steve says he loves it, the music. I'm not. Nostalgia. Yeah, it's nice, but it's not one of my favourites. But was that Rob Hubbard's first bit of game music, or did he do anything before?
He'd done a few before that. The only one I remember for certain was um, Clumsy Colin Action Biker.
Was that
That
before?
was
Was that before
yeah.
that? Was it really?
Yeah.
So
That's
I quite like Clumsy Call, or not Clumsy Call. I quite like the Action Biker tune.
um, it's all right, but the problem is if you're pretty good at the game, you very soon get sick of that music. It just goes on and on and on. It just loops and loops and loops. And by the end of it, you're turning the sound off. It's it's repetitive in the extreme.
Yeah. Right, that's interesting. Now, so that was his first because nobody really went on about the music that much in that game. But Thinking of Spring launched Hubbard's career, and then I don't know what the timeline was. Commando, and then was it one in the run? I can't remember.
Well, I think by the time Commando came along, he was already quite well established. I think Crazy Comics was before Commando. So, yeah, I mean, if Crazy Comics was one of his like early ones, then yeah, that rather made it obvious that we got someone here who really knows what he's doing as far as writing music on the 64.
And obviously, that's for another video, as we've spoke about in numerous occasions, and Sid shows. Music has just got better and better and better and better. And what was so I can never remember the name of it. What is your favorite Sid track? What's it called again? I can't remember, and it's mind blowing.
The Marcus Klein one, Hi-Fi Sky.
Aye.
Using a combination of Sid and samples.
Yeah. If you don't know what that tune is, Google it and listen to it, and it's hard to believe that that's coming from a Commodore 64. And so when you take that, when you think of like I don't know, some of the real early stuff, your Bruce Lee, and then that's coming out the same hardware. I think it's fair to say that there's my list going again. Apart from the Commodore 128, there is no. I mean, I've heard some quite good tunes on the Amstrad. Not a patch in the SID chip, I have to say, but
no.
Yeah. I mean, the SID chip. I mean, the fact that, as we've bloody alluded to over the years, the fact that there's still people making music on this thing.
Oh yeah, I mean it's still as viable a musical instrument today as any synthesizers. So I'm not surprised that it's it's still going. What does surprise me is just what they are getting out of it now, and I still think it's capable of surprises. It's still going to.
I was just going to ask you that. Do you think it's still going to keep? Pushing boundaries.
Yeah, definitely.
I look forward to that. So anyway, there you go. C64. I think we've pretty much summed up. Great basic games, good sound effects, and phenomenal sound, and it had 2 joystick ports built in, which the Spectrum never had. Which Okay, right. The next one on the list, BBC. The only experience I had with the BBC, I didn't know there was one guy who was spoiled, had a BBC, and I remember going to his house and he showed me it was like CompuNet or something. It was like the early internet. Or it was like what's CFAX. He was showing me that. It was ludicrously expensive as well, wasn't it? It was like
Oh
400.
yeah, I thought it was nearer 500, but I'm open to correction. I mean, the only times, well, actually, no, there was one person I knew who had a BBC Micro, and he had Elite. That was the first time I saw Elite running. And the only other times that I had any, I actually used a BBC Micro was at school. So, of course, most of the stuff, that I was using was Presto. That's it. Yeah, Jim's just saying, that's the thing that he was saying. Yeah, I remember that. God, dear, that's a blast from the past. Presto. Fucking hell. But yeah, I mean, it was mostly like educational stuff that I used the BBC for. I mean, I've got this was something that I used in Canada. It got me job interviews for positions that I was totally sort of like unsuitable for. But I've got a qualification that is the full title of it is the Cambridge Information Technology Word Processing Certificate. And of course, I always insisted on putting the full title because in Canada, as soon as they saw the word Cambridge, they were like, okay, right. They all thought I went to Cambridge University. No. So it sounds impressive, but what it actually is I can use a word processor on a BBC Micro. It's not worth the fucking paper it's printed on. But it opened doors, so I've got to be grateful to the BBC Micro just for that, And then I'd get the interview and I would completely flummox it because I'm a master of saying the worst things possible at job interviews. I've turned it into an art form. There was one instance. To this day, I cannot believe I did this. He asked me the question, are you ambitious? And I looked at him and I went, no, not really. Jesus Christ, what was I doing?
Thank you very much, Mr. L. We'll be in touch.
Yeah. That was a real smart move, that, wasn't it?
Eh? There's your jacket. Second door on the left. Thank you very much. But it reminds me of that meme that I've seen on Facebook, where the guy says to the girl, two people are interviewing the girl, and says, "Have you got any flaws in your character?" She goes, "I tend to." What was it? I tend to speak my mind. And the guy goes, "Well, I don't think that's a weakness." And she replies, "I don't give a fuck what you think."
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I remember that one.
So did you get that certificate from school then?
Yeah. So yeah, it's just a high school thing. And yeah, it's absolutely worthless.
I never got that.
Well, I'd say unless there are any sort of like major companies out there that are still using BBC Micros, then yeah, I'm willing. Well, as long as they want me to do word processing. Other than that, yeah, I'm fucked.
I'll pass on the details at the end of this video. Yep, Colin's saying, "Well, cause they're saying the wrong thing. I don't believe it." Yeah, me neither, Colin.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine, but yeah, it does happen.
Excuse me. I mean, hardware-wise, the BBC. In fact, let's just bring up this for a second.
Hardware-wise, it can very much be argued that the BBC Micro is the best 8-bit computer that's ever put together. Well, at least the BBC Master was certainly could certainly do it. I personally think there's one computer that beats it, but yeah, the BBC Master was. I mean, it had everything. It wasn't a gaming machine, that is for sure. You know, it's not going to have any gaming hardware, but BBC was for games due to only 32K memory. Yeah, the BBC Master didn't have that though. BBC Master had 128K, so yeah, but it didn't really have gaming hardware. So I mean, it was never built to be a gaming machine. I think Elite was the exception rather than the rule, you know.
Yeah. If you've ever, I don't know if you've ever, I don't know if you play many like emulators for the BBC, but there's a guy called Richard Broadhurst he was on a Chumstock pish with me a couple of years ago, and he has converted about half a dozen, or probably more than that actually, arcade games, and they are quite literally perfect. But again, it's obviously with the 40 years of experience and coding routines and all that, but it proves that the BBC was a good machine. But back in the day, yeah, I mean, we'll move on to the games in a second. I mean, hardware-wise, it did have a really nice keyboard. You can see there. That was for putting was it the Cub monitor, I think, was it called?
Yeah, the Cub, yeah, that's right.
I had one of them up in the loft for about 10 years, and I ended up fucking throwing it out because I thought...
Yeah, it's a tiny little thing that flickered like fuck knows what, even in those days.
So there you go. Well, typical price. What was A? What do you mean A? Oh, was that? Oh, because...
Well, yeah, you had the Model A and the Model B, didn't you?
And what was the difference? Oh, right, A, there you go. I'm answering one question. A was 16K and B was the... So that was the only difference, was the extra memory?
I'm sure there were other differences. Jim's the one to ask. He's the BBC Micro expert. I'm sure there were other differences. It wasn't just memory size, but I couldn't tell you what they are.
Aye, I think one of the big advantages, it was extremely expandable. You know, if that was your bag, then yeah, you could connect to the wonders of Prestel. You could send bulletin board messages to your pal and next door, and yeah, you could expand it and all this kind of bollocks. There's Jim there. What's he saying there?
Because the 16K in the Model A, a lot of the screen modes found in the Model B were missing. There you go. So yeah, it did go beyond just the.
Right. B had more modes. Yeah.
Yeah, I never used a Model A when I was at school. It was always Model Bs, and I'm sure at high school, I'm sure we did have one or two Masters as well. But yeah, that's the one I'm all about when it comes to the BBC. It's the BBC Master. The A and B, well, the A I don't really know. The B was okay, but the Master was that was the real top end stuff from Acorn.
Presumably, presumably the Master came out after 19. When did this magazine come out? 1983.
Yeah, 83. Yeah, I think the Master, again, Jim can tell us. I think the Master came out either 85, 86, or something like that. I think.
Yeah. So I mean, from an expandability point of view, you know, you could probably get virtually any. It had disk drives before disk drives were even invented. Oh, there you go. Master was
86. Yeah.
Yeah, it was extremely expandable at discs and all that kind of stuff. I mean, hardware-wise, the keyboard was great, but you know, from a gaming point of view, you didn't really care about the keyboard. It did have it. You could connect joysticks. I've got one of the BBC joysticks, and it's fucking awful. It's literally a little metal shaft that comes out, and it's analog.
Yeah, that's it. It's an analog joystick. I mean, it's fine if you're playing games like Rebs, which I remember playing on the BBC Micro.
That was a game.
It's perfect for Rebs. It's about the only game that was on the BBC that it was good for. You know, Yeah, well, it wasn't the greatest joystick you've ever used, is it?
I tried to play Jetpack on it, trying to use the analog stick, and it's bloody, and it doesn't even self-center. So when you move it to the
Oh
side,
no,
you
no,
like
it
it
won't.
just
No.
aye, yeah, it's a terrible joystick. But aye, I'm sure you could probably plug in better joysticks. But yeah, it had all the kind of hardware and that, what have you. Sound-wise, I don't know what it was built in sound, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was fairly basic. I think the audio. Yeah, really nothing
Weak
to write home
sound.
about.
Oh, weak sound when not amplified. Well, I beg to differ because, in fact, I've still got a BBC somewhere, and you you can't actually. I couldn't physically get there's not a volume control in it, and I couldn't physically. I think there is some way. I think there's a basic command that you can type in to reduce the sound, but it only works as long as the computer's on. So when you switch it off, it defaults to the 100%. What I ended up having to do, it was actually so loud, and because it's quite kind of shrill, it's like a bloody fire alarm going off. I ended up having to put sellotape over it to try and muffle it because it was too loud, you know. But
Yeah.
aye, so I mean the sound. I mean, where would you compare it between the Amstrad C64 Spectrum?
Oh fucking hell! I mean, it's nowhere near the. I mean, it's better than the Spectrum. I think that's about as far as I would. That's as far as I would go there.
Yeah, and obviously it was just an internal beeper, wasn't it? It was like the PC, original PC kind of
Yeah,
speakers.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Steve can tell us. Steve, you're a bit of a BBC fan. Let us know what you think of the sound. So yeah, the sound wasn't great, but the games. Was there much in the way of games for the BBC?
Not really. It wasn't like it was completely devoid of games, but yeah, most of them were nothing really to write home about. Of course, with the one obvious exception, Mr. Fenton is asking, did the original Elite have analog movement or was it just on off? The original was yeah, just on off. It didn't have analog movement, but I think the executive edition, and again, Jim can put me right on this because he's got the executive edition. I think that could use the analog joystick. I think it could, but if it could, that was the only one that
You're
did.
saying executive, is this a version of an Elite?
Yeah, it was a version. It was for. Well, it wasn't even so much that it was for the master. It was. Um, Jim's not sure. Actually, if Jim, if you can put a bit in there to sort of explain about Elite Executive Edition. He did a video showing his BBC Master. He actually has one, and well worth taking a look actually. And he's got, I say, he has the Executive Edition there, and it makes all the other versions, including the earlier BBC Micro versions, look really basic. The only problem with it is you start off with 1,000,000 credits and you've got a fully kitted out ship. So, I mean, all the talent is gone, you know.
Yeah. I've never heard of that. Does it run on a standard
Oh
BBC?
no!
No.
You need a real souped up machine to run it.
Right, and that was the only one. You reckon that because that would make a difference to playing that game, especially when you're yeah, it would make a difference playing the game if you had an analog thing. Well, there you go. It's Jim saying.
Yeah. Yeah, so the executive edition, yeah, it was an enhanced version of Elite for BBC Master. It was designed to use the co-processor, the 6502 second processor. So yeah, it was designed for two processors, and
Aye.
yeah, it showed. I mean, it's
Like, yeah,
staggeringly fast. In fact, I could almost go so far as to say in some places it was almost too fast. Trying to dock
yeah.
was really tough.
How have you played it? Through emulation?
I've not yet, but
Just watching it.
I've seen Jim play it. I mean, he's playing it on original hardware, and the code processors were nearly as much as the bees were. Yeah, I can well imagine.
Yeah.
So yeah, you were going to be spending quite the small fortune if you were going to really sort of like get out your BBC Master, but you could. That's the thing. It had the had immense expandability, more than I think any other computer, 8-bit computer that has ever been on the market.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, like I know on the BBC, like you couldn't really expand the Commodore 64. You couldn't expand any of these machines that I was aware of. And yeah, all right, we're not talking about money, but yeah. So in theory, if you had a spare £1,500 or £1,000 back in 1986, you could have the ultimate kind of BBC computer.
I think you needed quite a bit more than a grand for the ultimate BBC Master. Yeah.
Which in today's money, you'd be talking about what, 3-4 grand or something for a computer.
You could well be talking about that sort. Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost as much as buying a new Nvidia fucking video card, but yeah.
Or a weekend at Centre Parks. Yeah.
Okay, that good, eh?
Aye, so yeah, I mean, hardware wise, it was impressive. I think it's fair to say, and this will apply to every machine that we're going to talk about tonight. If there, you could certainly pick a handful of games that if you're going to play it, you need to play the BBC one. I mean, you obviously Elite, you said, Revs, that was by Jeff Crammond. Did Jeff Crammond? Oh, he did a really accurate flight simulator. What was it called again? On the BBC, it began with A. What the hell was it called? Began with A. I just know that it was. Oh fuck. Anyway, yeah. I mean, you've got Revs. I mean, it came out in the C64, but it wasn't as good. You've got Elite. Fucking, we're struggling to think.
Well, Revs Plus on the 64 was a massive improvement over the original Revs. If you're gonna, if you're going to play on the 64, you've got to play Revs Plus.
Evening, Trev. How are you, mate? So what there was a I bought Revs for the C64 based on the Zap review. So was there a follow-up version that came out then?
Well, it came along a bit later, and they really improved the controls on it a lot. It plays a lot more like Formula One Grand Prix on the Amiga. Right. So you're still using your standard joystick, but the controls handle a lot better. It made a big difference. It was a huge huge improvement.
Aye, Steve's saying there, Revs had extra tracks as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, to summarise, yeah, the BBC, impressive bit of hardware, lovely keyboard, really good basic. I think you'd be hard to disagree that it had probably the best basic of any of these computers.
I mean, I wasn't really one for doing a lot of programming, but I mean, it was certainly better than the 64s, that's for sure.
And given that you've got a certificate, it always had quite a good word processor.
Oh yeah, its word processor was fantastic. Yeah, I got the I've got the certificate to prove it as well.
Games. Yeah, there was a few really good games, but by and large, compared to certainly the C64 and Spectrum, it wasn't really the computer.
There was no comparison.
Yeah, like this next one's going to be pretty quick, I would imagine, because I've not got any experience of it. Another review, the Amstrad. Now, I think we were talking earlier on that I can't remember who the hell it was. The Lynx, the computers Lynx guys, they said they didn't want games to run in it or something. Was that always?
The snobbery. They didn't want it to be a gaming computer, which was just as well because nobody wrote any games for it, which is quite something when you consider. I mean, there were even games out for Jupiter Ace, for fuck's sake. So the fact that there weren't any for the computers Lynx is, you can almost view it as an achievement.
I beg to differ, but that's actually not true. I've got the Mister thing, and there's a Computer Links core, and there's actually a lot of games. I don't know how to load them, but there's actual games released for it.
Okay, no, okay, that I did not expect that.
Yeah. What the bloody hell are we talking about? Yeah, we're going on about. Yeah, obviously, Sir Clive Sinclair said, the Spectrum's it's not for game, it's not for gaming people. Alan Sugar,
I think Clive Sinclair was a bit deluded when he said that, because you only had to look at the Spectrum and it's like, yeah, this is something for people to put games on.
I think after he realised that all the kids were rushing out to buy it, not to play 3D view, but to play Manic Miner, he realised, wait a minute, the money's to be made with games. He then brought out a version, I don't know what version, with a built-in joystick adapter. So there you go. That says it all.
Was it still in Sinclair's ownership then, or was that when it was in the Amstrad?
You might be right. Actually, it might be. What about the 128? The Toast Rack one. Did that have a built-in joystick?
Oh, I've no idea. I've never used or seen it. Well, actually, I've seen a 128, but I've never used it. Never really paid a lot of attention to it.
I think you're right. Actually, I think, and that's where I'm going with this. When the Amstrad came out, Alan Sugar, let's make it play games, fucking built-in tape and all that kind of stuff. He even bundled games with it. Do you not remember it? You got this gigantic box that was like that thin, but it was huge and it had about like 20 games.
Oh, I don't.
I think it said like worth £299. So he brought out this machine and he bundled games with it because he knew that that's where the money was to be made. And then when they bought, I think Amstrad bought over Sinclair, they released was it the Spectrum Plus 2, I think it was.
Yeah, the Plus 2 and the Plus 3, yeah.
And it had joystick ports built in. So yeah, the Amstrad was designed, for people to play games. I mean, I've not got a lot of knowledge about the Amstrad. I only knew one guy that had it, and the only game he had, and only had 2 games. Actually, this is interesting. Yeah, that is really interesting. He had, well, it's interesting if you're a nerd like me. The only 2 games he had are probably the best versions of that game. One was Steve Davis Snooker. That is the best version of Steve Davis Snooker. You'd probably say, well, that's not very difficult. But it was the best version. It was actually, you could actually line it up and you could pop balls. And the other one is Blagger by Anthony Crowther. And I prefer the Amstrad version to the Commodore 64 one.
I mean, it's a game that I know of. I know the title, but I've never played it, so I couldn't really say very much. I can't really say a lot about the Amstrad itself. I only ever knew 2 people who had had an Amstrad. One was my next door neighbour, and he didn't play games on it, and the other one was an ex-girlfriend, and the only game I ever saw running was Pac-Mania. It's no surprise I never fucking went near it. So my knowledge of Amstrad gaming is extremely limited, but all I know is that what I've seen hasn't impressed me
Yeah,
one bit.
I think it's. I mean, unfortunately for the Amstrad, I think it was actually a decent bit of hardware. When done properly, the game's phenomenal. I mean, what's the? It's not Contra. What the hell is it called? It was released. Was it Vindicators or something? Or it's the one run and gun game. You run along and you go like that. That's narrowing it down to about 200 games. Was it Greiser? Was it Greiser? That's
Oh, I couldn't
that.
stand Greiser.
Aye, but visually beautiful looking. Renegade and Amstrad is the version to play. It looks like the arcade. It's really the colours when done right. There's a handful of games. Some people would say Chase HQ and the Amstrad's better than the Spectrum one. I don't know, but aye, it is Greiser. Thanks, Richard. There were certain games that looked phenomenal. It had a really nice colour palette. It was able to. In fact, it's got the best home version of Donkey Kong, bar none. The original, the one that came out by Ocean, play it. It's even got the correct aspect ratio. It is phenomenal. It is a brilliant game. So it was an extremely capable machine, but I think, unfortunately for Amstrad, it came out. It was too little, too late. The Spectrum and Commodore 64 were the two main players.
Yeah. Yeah, that was its big problem. It actually had two big problems to overcome. Firstly, yeah, it was far too late, actually getting onto the market. And the other problem was Amstrad was notorious for horrendous build quality on their, anything they made. So there were a lot of people, and I was absolutely one of them, just heard the word Amstrad and computer, and I just thought, yeah, I'm not going anywhere near that. And it kind of stuck, really, So I do remember seeing one game, and it was quite impressive, really, insofar as it managed to be the worst of, the Amstrad, Commodore 64, and Spectrum versions, and that is fucking Karnov. Yeah, believe it or not, the Amstrad version is the worst of the three.
That is really saying something.
Yeah.
Really saying something. Fucking hell. I can't actually recall. I think I've done an arcade perfect on it, but I'm sure we picked the Commodore 64 version as. I think we did a worst arcade conversions on the C64.
Oh yeah. Karnov is easily one of the worst arcade conversions of all time, isn't it? It's almost reached legendary status as far as that goes.
It was like a really awful conversion of the Spectrum version. It looked like a Spectrum.
Yeah, well, all the versions look like the Spectrum. That was all they did. They just ported over the Spectrum version. Certainly with the 64. The Amstrad one, because all the colours, or the vast majority of colours, are totally different. It looks like it was actually coded from scratch, and yet they've still made it look like it's, look identical to the Spectrum one, just with different colours everywhere. And it's like, surely they could have at least attempted to do something. No. They coded the Spectrum version, and every other version was just somehow some kind of port from that. Ultimately lazy fucking, coding that.
Yeah, I think again the Amstrad was unfortunate that I think it had the same processor as the Spectrum, and so a lot of and it was the same as the MSX. If you look at a lot of arcade conversions, not even arcade conversions, just games that came out in these three machines, the Amstrad, Spectrum, and MSX look exactly the same. Like, is it Nemesis? I think they look exactly the same.
Oh, yeah, with the Gradius one. It's actually I think Salamander is even worse. Salamander on the Spectrum bears almost no resemblance to the coin-op, and then you play the Amstrad one, it's identical to the Spectrum one. It's like, well, there is no excuse for that.
And it's got a tiny, tiny little play there, and then you look at the Commodore 64 one, and it's fucking phenomenal.
Yeah, the 64 is one of the most impressive arcade coin-ops you've ever seen, and then the Spectrum and And
Aye.
Amstrad ones are like two of the worst.
I think what was the name of the guy? There was a guy who came to prominence as an artist on the BBC on the Commodore 64 because I had what the hell was it called? It was a modem, and you could CompuNet, and you could download these guys' pictures. Was he? He did the loading screen for Sentinel, the big massive eye. Was it Hugh Bins or something? Was it Hugh something or other?
I don't know the name. Obviously, I know the Sentinel image.
Yeah, I can't. Anyway, he did the graphics for what game are we talking about again? Salamander. He did the graphics for Salamander, and I think he also did the graphics for Last Ninja. I think
okay.
Yeah. He was the Rob Hubbard, Martin Galway of graphics.
Mind you, I mean that loading screen of Sentinel always be sort of like wondering, what the fuck does this have to do with the actual game?
Absolutely nothing.
I mean, it wasn't the worst. The worst for that by a distance was the loading screen for Thrust 2, which for some reason it was the persistence of memory, the Salvador Dali painting. What the fuck did that have to do with the game?
I think I played it briefly. They've done away with the. In fact, one of the guys that's going to be on the live stream in a couple of weeks, Gary Penn. Did Gary Penn ex-Zap review? Was he not involved with?
Yeah, he was involved in it somewhere. I'm not quite sure what it was that he did with that game, but yeah, I know he's in the credits there.
Well, maybe ask him what the fuck were you playing at with your loading screen?
Well, when it comes to Thrust 2, that thing has a lot of problems. The loading screen's probably the least of them.
Sorry, William's going off topic slightly then. If you play a Vectrex, if you look where my pen is. I never played one back in the day, but I've got one now and it's a phenomenal machine. But that's for
Yeah, I remember playing on one back in the day.
In Woolworths, was it by any chance?
I think it might have been, yeah.
I think that was the only place. If you look at any Vectrex game on eBay, and I've got about 11 games there. They've all got the Woolworths stickers, and it's got like there's about 5 stickers, and like the last price was like 99 pence, and I paid like 30 quid for it.
I was saying, imagine getting a Vectrex game for 99p. Yeah, I'd be fucking laughing.
It would be ridiculous.
No chance of that now.
Couldn't give them away. They absolutely couldn't give them. Nobody wanted them. Absolutely nobody wanted. Anyway, we're going completely off topic here.
We're
talking not that that's something we would ever do. Amstrad, the games. It suffered from Spectrum ports, and some of the Amstrad games are. It's probably of all the computers, it's probably got some of the most impressive games for colour, and it's got I don't know. Does anybody know how many colours the Amstrad could display on the screen at once? It was a much more than the C64. It's got a beautiful, really vibrant. So when you get a game like an arcade conversion like Donkey Kong, it looks the part because the C64's got quite muted colours, whereas Amstrad's bright and gaudy. So it's got some of the best looking games, but it's also got some of the fucking worst games ever. Some of the conversions games in Amstrad was just, it was quite literally, it was just awful. I don't know why that was. It's probably, Richard saying they're lazy coders and poor ports. That's pretty much what it was.
Well, the other problem was because by the time the Amstrad came along, I'm trying to remember when it was actually released. Was it 85 or was it 86?
Yeah, I think 85, yeah.
Yeah. So the Amstrad was like brand new on the market, but like, the Spectrum and the 64, coders had 3 years to get the grips with the thing. So, they are bringing out, games, and, these coders are doing all right with it. And then there's the Amstrad, and it's like, completely new. So, it could also explain why so many of them were... 84. I didn't know it was as early as that. So it could also explain why there were so many that were just like lazy fucking Spectrum ports, because they just didn't know how to, and more to the point, couldn't be bothered to, figure out how to get it,
Yeah,
properly done on the Amstrad.
I never really considered that actually. I just think, oh, Commodore 64 is great, Spectrum's not bad, Amstrad's fucking garbage. But then, as you say, they had about a 6 year head start. Not 6 years, but they
Yeah,
had
it's about
quite a bit
yeah,
head start.
yeah. Although the fact that they were still charging full price for the Amstrad version means they couldn't really use that as an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
If you're gonna charge full price for your game, then it needs to be good right across the board. We're not gonna accept. Oh well, we're still getting the grips with the Amstrad. Well, if that's the case, then don't charge us, $8.99 for a game. Charge us $2.99 or something.
So I mean, the Amstrad certainly once it kind of found its feet, pretty much every game that was released from sort of 1985 up till whenever it was, it came out for the Spectrum C64 Amstrad. Some of the Amstrad ones were better. Some of them were, I would probably say the majority weren't as good as either the C64 or the Spectrum. So from a gaming point of view, I would probably say the Amstrad wasn't the best
Oh
8-bit
no,
for games,
no.
I would think. I mean, sound wise and music wise, it had the same. Was it the same sound chip as
Yeah,
the?
the same AY chip as the Spectrum Plus 2, 3, whatever it was, 128. Yeah, very pale imitation of the SID.
And there's Richard saying an interesting thing which I mentioned earlier on. He said that also Ocean charged the extra £1 for no reason other than maybe they just thought that Spectrum owners were poor and they couldn't afford it. I don't know, but yeah, that was a bit cheeky considering it was probably going to be a shit version.
A shit version of a shit game, especially if it was like, a licensed one. Mind you, one thing that the Amstrad and the Spectrum versions both had over the 64, at least Ocean finally got round to releasing Street Hawk on those two computers. Because the 64 version, it never fucking showed up.
It never actually did it ever get released, or did it ever get finished? I should say.
What, for the 64?
Does it exist in some shape or form, or no that you're aware of?
No,
Nah.
it never got finished. The source code for the game itself does exist. It is out there, but the source code for the graphics doesn't. The graphics are done. The game was something like 95% finished when Ocean pulled the plug on it. So, yeah, it was a bit of a disaster all round. That.
Interesting. I know there was a Chase HQ2 which was advertised for the Amstrad and it never ever got released. I think it's like the holy grail of Amstrad games.
Of Amstrad games.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I was never a fan of was it special SCI, isn't it? Special Criminal Investigation, or
Something
whatever
like
it is.
that, yeah.
Yeah, I was never really a fan of it, but I mean, let's face it, it's a billion times better than Chase HQ, especially on a 64. I genuinely think that the Commodore 64 conversion of Chase HQ is worse than the Commodore 64 conversion of Cisco Heat.
It's a close call, to be fair.
I mean, it is it's so staggeringly slow, and it is so obviously using assets that have just been ported straight from the Spectrum version. So for it to for them to release that and then charge the extra quid on a title that clearly had the minimum amount of effort put into it, I just think that's insulting.
Mm. What was it? What was the other one again? Cisco Heat. Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I remember rightly, even the Commodore 64 version of the Chase HQ, it didn't even look like a Commodore 64 game.
No, it was basically the Spectrum's road routine, including the visuals, but it had Commodore 64 hardware sprites, which looked awful. I mean, they were like really badly done. They didn't look remotely like cars. They looked more like fucking UFOs or something. Yeah, it was. It was an absolute stinking shit pile from start to finish. That I think.
And yeah, but as we know, the Commodore 64 could do some really good. I mean, like Buggy Boy's a great conversion. There's lots of really good games for it. It's just, and that's pretty much all these games for all these systems. It was lazy ports and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think we'd be fair to say that the Amstrad wasn't. It did have some good games. It had a big thing of games, but if it wouldn't be the most. You wouldn't pick that over either of the Spectrum or C64. I wouldn't.
There are other computers I would pick over the Amstrad as well,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, and well, one of them is the last one. No, sorry, our second last one, because we've got your one that we're going to add on to the end there. Yeah, so that's the Amstrad. Right, the Atari. Let's have a wee look.
Well, this is your area of expertise because
Yeah,
when it comes to the Atari, I know the 2600 console, and that's about it. I did. I have used. Actually, I've had brief sort of like goes on the 400, the 800, and the 600 XL, but yeah, I never did a hell of a lot with any of them.
I mean, the sad thing was, well, they came out. When did they came out? 1970 something.
I know the 800 was definitely it was about like 78. I think that came out.
I think they both came out at the same time. That was obviously the cheaper kind of counterpart. That had the. I've actually got two. I mean, I got both these computers for like under 100 quid for the two of them. The guy I bought that, and when it arrived, it had one of these in it as well. I'm like, oh, a sort of Brucey bonus. Yeah, under this bit here, the flap, you press that lifts up, and there's a cartridge port.
Yeah, the cartridge slot there.
Yeah, and it's the same where you press that bit and that lifts up. That had 16K, that had 48K. Good evening, Russ. The Atari 800 was the sort of flagship machine, and then obviously the Atari 400 was a slightly kind of lesser. I mean, from an expansion point of view, I think both could, you could. I think and this is we'll come on to that in a second, but these computers were obviously very popular in America. They weren't so popular in the UK, but everybody in America had disk drives, whereas in the UK we didn't have disk drives. We used tapes, and if you think loading a Commodore 64 game before turbo loaders became a thing was a bollock.
Yeah, it's nothing compared to these. Yeah, I know it was painfully slow on the Atari systems.
When people talk about loading a game and the C6, it took 20 minutes. No, my arse it did. A turbo loader probably an average loaded in about 2.5 to 3 minutes. But I remember when I got these, there were some tapes, and I can't remember what the hell I did. I must have got a tape deck for somewhere, and I loaded a game, and it took about 15 minutes to load. It was fucking painfully slow, like.
Let's answer William Arthur Fenton's question. Yeah, there is a Dragon. It's the Dragon 32. They don't have the Dragon 64 on there, but yeah, the 32's there.
That's like that. The Dragon is like your modern day mini console. It's just all space. That is as light as a feather. It looks really heavy, and it's not as light. I'm assuming that's just all fresh air that's in there. But yeah, Dragon 32. Was it? Sorry, I'm being extra clever here. Was it a Welsh computer? Was it a Welsh company that made it? Presumably.
I don't think so. I do seem to remember. I don't know if I'm getting this right or not, but I seem to remember that the Dragon 32 and the 64 even more so often had overheating problems. They would get like really hot, and yeah, you couldn't keep them on for a hell of a long time.
Which is a fundamental issue. with being a computer. Yeah, you can't actually have it on for very long.
Oh, you go. It was made in Wales. You know, I didn't realise that it was such a okay Welsh dragon. I didn't think it was as obvious as that.
Well, Colin's saying it was made in Wales, and he would know that. Yeah, I mean the summary is utterly uninspiring, although not outstanding in any way. A fairly priced and very popular machine. I mean that's
It
not
it
stopping him.
was actually it was fairly popular around the time here '83. I knew a couple of people. I mean, I was at junior school in '83, and I knew a couple of people who had Dragon 32s. So I mean, there was the market there. So what the fuck went wrong with it? I don't know if it was like difficult to code for or something, but yeah, the game market just never really sort of emerged for it. There were some, but
I
let's
know.
face it, it was never going to rival the 64 and Spectrum in the gaming front.
Yeah, I mean I don't know what the sound was like. I know it had the games were very green looking in the same way that people slag off the C60. Excuse me, the C64. But yeah, I don't know. It's a bit like the Oric. It just never really got off the starting blocks. It was kind of doomed to failure from day one. I think.
I think the Auric fared a little better than the Dragon did.
Mm-hmm.
Not a hell of a lot better, but yeah, I think the Auric had slightly more longevity than the Dragon.
Well, Collins probably pretty much summed it up. The Dragon has its place in history, but it really is a pile of wank. I'm not really going to disagree with that, I'm afraid, Colin. Anyway, let's get back to we're talking
Yeah,
about
back the Atari. One thing I can say about the Atari 8 bits, the Atari 400 was easily the worst keyboard I have ever used. It was horrific. I mean, you are practically breaking your fingers to get the fucking character to appear on the screen.
Aye, because it's not. If I could be bothered, I could go and get it. I've got mine. It's in the cupboard in there. I've never actually used it, other than to check it works. Yeah, what you can't really see here is that keyboard. That looks like the keys are sticking up the way like that does, but they're actually inset. It's a membrane,
Yeah,
and
membrane.
that brown bit is like a sort of like you've got to put your finger inside the hole to press it. So it's not really conducive for like touch typing or you couldn't use your word processing certificate very well
No,
much like.
I wouldn't be doing too much in the way of word processing on that thing. No.
But I mean, from what I gather, it had the same sound as the Atari 800. It had less memory. Although I think you could put an expansion thing in there. So I mean, hardware wise, yeah, it took cartridges. It had joy. In fact, I mean, 4 joystick ports.
Yeah, I mean the thing I also remember about the two of them. I mean they were big old lumps. You certainly it was an impressive looking thing. As far as like the actual aesthetics of the computer itself, especially the 800.
Oh, I call it the tank machine, the tank version, because it's I mean it's huge and it's heavy as fuck. When you lift that bit up there, all inside here is all cast iron for putting the cartridge in. It's got fucking solid iron in it. It's
Cast iron. Seriously.
oh yeah. Do you want me to go and get it? Hang the 2 ticks. I'll be back right back.
Because I've been left here to try and entertain the crowd, which is not really my forte.
Fucking hell! I need to get my breath just carrying it through there. Jesus. Right. Let me get rid of this for a second. There we are. This is. I'm trying to get. What can I use for? Fucking hell.
I didn't realise you had one of those. I thought you had the 800 XL, or is that
No,
one you've got as
I got
well?
this about 10 years ago. I said I got that plus the Atari 400 plus disk drives, and it was about £100. What can I use? Well, there's an A5 pad.
Oh
Give you
yeah,
an idea
yeah.
of
So yeah,
scaling.
it's a big
Fucking
old.
massive. And it weighs. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It must easily be about 8 or 9 kilograms. It weighs a fucking ton. If you press that, get it to work. There we go. Yeah. Ah, Jesus Christ. That's all cast iron. See that metal there? That's where the cartridges go.
I didn't realise it had 2 cartridge slots in there.
I don't know. Like one's left and one's right. Funnily enough, I think you always go in the left. But yeah, it's a big bastard. And then again in the front, there you go.
4 joystick ports.
4.
More computers should have had 4 joystick ports.
Right, I'm going to put that away. But yeah, this.
And they put the ports in the right place. That is definitely the place to put the joystick ports, right at the front there.
So how did they royally screw it up so badly with Atari ST? Let's put it underneath at the front, so you've got to lift it up.
Yeah.
And listen to that keyboard. That is a quality keyboard. Pure quality. That. Yep, they don't make them like that anymore. So I mean, yeah, from a physical point of view, hardware, it's an absolute behemoth.
Yeah.
I don't know what the sound is very. You can tell an Atari game with the sound is very, very distinctive. It's unlike any other machine. I don't know what. Is it the Poke chip or something? Is that what they call it?
Not sure on that. Is it the same audio that was in the 2600?
No, it's much better than that. No, it's a lot better than that.
I see. I always liked the audio in the 2600. Yes, it was very simple, but there was something about it I just thought was great.
Quite similar to the VIC-20. Yeah, it couldn't do very well. It was great for what it did. Arcade games, fantastic.
Yeah.
What we're talking about? Yeah, the sound chip in it. Yeah, the sound is. Again, I don't think the sound chip in the C6. So I don't think the sound chip in Atari it's not as good as the SID chip. But I know that what's his face, Rob Hubbard did do. I think did he do Warhawk on the Atari 800? And
I think he also did Jet Set Willy music, wasn't it?
Aye, and I have to say that it's pretty impressive. But then I've heard some tunes in the Amstrad, even the Spectrum 48K, bless it, and it's like in the right sort of like hands, it can do good stuff. So yeah. The Atari music capabilities, again, it's nowhere near the SID chip, but as far as sound effects go, I think the Atari, I would rate the Atari above the Commodore 64 purely for the ability to do sounds. It was more kind of whether they had learned their lesson with Atari 2600 and they've made a chip that is good at doing sound. Because bear in mind, Atari were making arcade machines back then.
No, so yeah.
They knew what they were talking about.
So would you say that the audio is as good as the VIC-20 sound effects?
Yeah,
that's really, because that is quite the statement.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I don't consider myself I've not got a vast knowledge of VIC-20 games. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I've played some games on live videos and what have you, but I don't have a vast back catalogue knowledge of the VIC-20. But no, some of the maybe if I was to actually do it side by side, I'd go, nah, you know what, the VIC-20 still beats it. Yeah, I'd maybe need to look at Grid Runner and just compare them. But no, I mean, as far as sound effects for games, the Atari is great. I'm trying to convince myself just with talking constantly. And the honest answer is I don't know, but the Atari is good at doing sound effects for games. Is it as good as the VIC-20? I'm not sure. I might need to. You need to leave that one with me, and we can talk about it at some other point.
Yeah, I think that would be quite the bold call. Yeah, I mean, the few Atari 800 games that I've seen and obviously heard, yeah, I wouldn't go that far.
I don't know. Can anybody help me out here? Can anybody say what they think of the Atari 800 or the Atari 800 or 4? I think the sound I think was exactly the same. The Atari 5200, which was that was a
console, wasn't it?
Yeah, but they left the same sound chip in it. So the 2600 and the 5200 got exactly the same hardware for sound.
Well, what about 7800? Or was that one updated?
That was, well, it's debatable whether you would say it was improved. It was
the controls certainly weren't.
Yeah. I don't know much about the 7800.
I was not a fan on that of that one. I was just seeing what Jim's written there, that basic came on a cartridge instead of being part of the OS. So there's no like basic ROM inside.
No, you switch it on. In fact, you would love it because you switch it on, and I think it's a word processor. You switch it on, and it's just it's like Notepad in your Windows PC. It's just a cursor, and you can just type. I don't know what else you can do. I don't know if you can print from it or whatever. I suppose you must be able to. But yeah, basic. I've got the basic cartridge up there. You plug the basic cartridge in.
Okay, that's yeah.
So yeah. I mean, when you got your Commodore 64 with no tape deck, at least you were able to type in, think of a number. You could type in something. But if you were unlucky enough to get an Atari 800 for Christmas and you didn't get any games and you didn't get the basic cartridge, you basically had a computer that you could just type letters.
Yeah, you could write out like a shopping list and then you'd have to memorise it.
Like there's Colin, there's somebody that knows what we're talking about. The Atari 400, 800 was ahead of its time. The sound chip is the Pokey, which also doubles as I/O. Now he's talking. I don't understand that. And was used in many arcade games, including Vector Star Wars. I think that's quite an impressive thing, is it not?
Yeah, I mean the audio for Star Wars Coin Up was pretty good.
What does that mean? Doubles as I/O.
Well, I/O, I assume is input output, but
that's above my limited knowledge. But no, I mean it's the sound in Atari games is very distinctive. You would listen if you play Drop Zone on the Atari 800, or what do you call it? It's got a very kind of filtery sound to it. You play Fort Apocalypse, you play Drop Zone, it's got its own sound, very, very unique. Is it better than the VIC-20? I don't know, but it's hard to. It's like comparing lemons with bloody windmills. You know what's better. The Atari has got, as far as doing games, the Atari sound effects are spot on. Can it do sound effects? Can it do speech like the Commodore 64? I've not heard anything to say it can.
I'd be very surprised.
And as far as music goes, I've heard a few decent tracks by people like Rob Hubbard, whatever, but nothing jumps out. There's absolutely nothing. I would struggle to name any other than whatever it was. I can't even remember the name of the bloody game. I'm completely for War.
Yeah, I'll say that memorable.
Warhawk, yeah, Rob Hubbard did do it. I would like to hear it on this, but as we know, StreamYard is pish for sound, so we're not going to bother. So, yeah, I mean, hardware-wise, Atari is a phenomenal machine. Like the physical, it's an impressive-looking beast. Great keyboard, 4 joysticks. you know, what more do you want? It's got a cartridge port. You could, if somebody breaks in your house, if you hit them with that, they would know about it, and they couldn't steal it because it takes 2 guys to actually carry the damn thing.
Yes.
Gaming wise, because I'm firmly old school. I've got a love of the really old games. You know, your Fort Apocalypses, the early stuff. The Atari, and I've said that to people before. I think I'm actually repeating myself already in the same stream, which is a bit concerning. That people that say, "Oh, they love the original Atari, the original US Gold stuff in the C64." Go and get yourself an Atari, and you've got this massive back catalogue of games. In fact, that's what I should have actually done. I've got my game base collection, and this literally has every game for every system. But interesting just to do a quick comparison and see how many games.
Because you're saying that you're like really into the old school stuff, and yet you never struck me as being a particularly big fan of the 2600, which is as old school as it gets.
I never had one. I never ever had one. My mum and dad wouldn't buy me one. I never owned one, so I never had that nostalgia. I didn't. I knew one guy that had one, and I got to use it twice. So I never ever had one. That's why I've not got any. I don't talk about it very often because I've not got any nostalgia for it. The only games I ever got to, I says, my mate came over one night with it. We played Pac-Man and Space Invaders, and that was it. So when people going about how wonderful it is, I don't know, because I never actually owned one until about 10 years ago, 15 years ago maybe.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't have the nostalgia. Right, I'm just having a quick look here. This game-based thing, which is pretty much you'll struggle to not find a game in this thing. Amstrad, there's 5,787 games. The Spectrum has. Oh, it's loading. Yeah, there we go. It's got 17,208 games. And I know I don't even have to look at it. There's a new version of GameBase came out for the Commodore 64, and it's got exactly 30,000 games. I think a lot of them are fucking Boulder Dash clones and type-ins. But yeah, there's a phenomenal amount of games. The Atari 800. Let's have a quick wee look. Atari 800 has 7,491 games. So there's a vast collection of really good games. If you like old style games, arcade games.
Well, hang on. Let's rephrase that. There's a vast collection of games.
What did I say? Did I fling in the word good?
Yeah, really good. I find it a little difficult to believe that all 7,000 games for the Atari 800 were really good.
I mean, for early conversions, I mean, I'm looking here, Mr. Do's Castle, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, the problem with Atari was it never took off. I think America, by the time we got to like 1983, 1984, the US had moved on to like the NES probably, or whatever that is. What? Yeah, it moved on to consoles, I think. By that point,
well, I don't know. Not in '83. No, I mean they would have like the Apple II or something, and the
aye.
I know the Tandy TRS 80 was somewhat popular in America, and of course the 64, of course.
Of course, yeah. But I think that the Atari died quite early on. It died, and you know, the Spectrum, the Commodore 64, they still had about another bloody 8 years left. So the quality, well, not all the time, but the quality of games, the quality of sound and music and all that really took off. So you'll never really see a modern, really incredible game in Atari, because it pretty much, I mean, I'm not going to see that kind of, I was going to look at the timelines of these, but yeah, pretty much by probably 1985, the Atari was dead. So if you wanted to play, I don't know, Outrun. Not that you'd want unless you're sick.
No, no thanks.
You wouldn't be able to play it in Atari because the Atari didn't get it. Got conversions of like early games, Dig Dug and what have you. But if you wanted to play your bloody Buggy Boy or Operation Wolf, forget it because it stopped being supported at that point. So yeah, massive amount of games, but they're older games. Hardware wise, awesome, fantastic machine. Yeah, and sound is pretty much better than the Spectrum, probably better than Amstrad, I don't know, but not a patch on the Commodore 64. So, and the last one, I was just about to wrap up there, but we've got one last one which you've flung in, and I don't have much experience of this at all, and it was the Commodore 128.
Yeah. For me, hands down, the greatest 8-bit computer that was ever released. So it was to a degree two computers in one. I mean, you had your 64 as well as the 128. There's no getting away from it. The vast majority of people who had 128s, the only thing they ever did in 128 mode was just type Go 64, you know, or switch the thing on with the Commodore key held down. You know, a lot of people didn't really do a lot with the thing while it was in 128 mode, and they missed out. There are so many features built into this fucking thing. I mean, remember when we spoke before about the Commodore Plus 4, and you know it got the name because it had the 4 modules that built in there. So it had word processing again, a database, and
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Right.
I can't remember what the other two were now, but a spreadsheet or something, and something else. But I mean the 128 had like, you know, things like this built into it as well. I mean, it has the sprite editor is built into it. You know, it's got the second processor there. You know, it's got the Z80 in there, so that you know, so you can use like CPM on that. Now, okay, that's not really.
It's got a second processor in it.
Yeah, it's got the Z80 in there as well as the 6502.
See, I really know. I mean, I owned one for about 2 days because the one I bought, I can't remember what was wrong with it. I had something wrong with it, and I sold it because it was basically didn't work properly. So actually, I had the 6502 and the Z80.
Yeah, it needs a Z80 in there. CPM will only run on Z80s, so it had to have a Z80 in there. I mean, the Z80 run pretty fucking slow. But it was there, you know. So you had CPM if you were ever going to need to, you know, use that. Gamers were never going to be using that thing. So yeah, Colin and Jim are saying here, so yeah, it has the second graphics chip as well. Yeah, the VDC. So I mean, in terms of hardware, I think it's up there with the BBC Master, and because obviously I'm going to be looking at computers from a gamer's sort of like point of view, I will go with the 128 over the Master because it has the gaming hardware. Well, yes, there are some compatibility issues between some 64 games and the 128, but I think the majority of the time that wasn't the case. I would be quite happy to you know, live with the few compatibility issues that were there. If it meant that I, you know, had a 128, yeah, I'd be I'd be quite all right with that.
Did you own a 128?
No, it was the computer I wanted more than any other. Even when I had my Amiga, I still wanted a 128. I mean, for the longest time, I think it was for a good 2 or 3 years when I had my Amiga, I still had my 64. So I did like the fact that, I had, the 8-bit and the 16-bit. But, what I really wanted was, an Amiga and a 128. That would have been the ultimate pairing.
Yeah, I remember one mate, a complete unrelated anecdote. The guy that had one. Have you seen Restless Natives? Film Restless Natives. The guy, the two Scottish guys. It was a Bill Forsyth film.
No, I don't know that one.
Well, anyway, he actually he had a small part in it. A guy called Andy Brown. He had a Commodore 128, and yeah, it was I never actually saw it run. And I think I tell a lie. I think I saw it running Commodore 128 mode once, and it was Silent Service. I think it was. I think he maybe played that in 128 mode, but every other time it
In
was
128 mode, really?
for Silent. Maybe I'm talking bollocks. I remember he played Silent Service a lot. Maybe that's my memory failing me again. Maybe it was just the 128 mode. If that's the case, then he never played it. I never saw him play anything in 128 mode. It was always just C64 one.
As you saw, Richard Wars just said there about the Amstrad had CPM games, mostly Infocom games, and the CPM games that were available for the 128. There were the Zork games, so you could play that in CPM. So yeah, it wasn't completely game free, especially if you liked your text adventures. I don't think CPM was really sort of, let's face it, it wasn't there as like a gaming platform. Yeah. Wasn't the last V8 available in 128 mode? Oh, Christ, and I did a review of that as well. I honestly can't remember if it was in 128 or if it was in 64 mode.
There was. Let me hang on. Stop that. Let me just present the screen. Share screen. Window. Well, can you see that? There you go. There's the game base for the 128. According to that, there's 273 games. I don't know. You can see if I actually know any of them. there's an Alley Cat. Your friend and my friend, Andrew Bravery.
Yeah, I was not a fan of Alley Cat. It wasn't a great one, that.
Nah, there was that. Revenge Do. Arkanoid, so that had. I don't remember that. Basic 128. Bubble Bobble.
Well, I remember playing. There was a Kickstart. No, it wasn't Kickstart. It was Kickstart 128. It was sort of halfway between Kickstart and Kickstart 2. You know, it.
Why is? There's there was.
There's the last V8. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it had the extra level. The first level was different on the 128 version. But yeah, I can't remember if that was played in 128 mode or in 64 mode. I seem to remember that Elite 128 is actually played in 64 mode.
What's that even in this thing?
No, Elite 128. It wasn't a like official. Release.
Right.
It was like a fan made thing.
Yeah, I mean, looking down there, there's tons of these disc games. There's not a lot. Well, I mean, to be fair to Andrew Bravery, there you go. At least he's putting out 128 versions. I mean, there's a. Well, it says C64 enhanced. Does that mean it would be running in C64?
Yeah, I think they'll be running in 64 modes. Yeah, I did quite like Morpheus. That was a good game. That.
And then there's Paradroid.
Paradroid. I'm not so fussed about. I always thought a 128 version of Hunter's Moon would have been great, but we never got that.
Doesn't look like there's an awful lot. Anyway, I mean, from a hardware point of view, so I had all these. I remember you did a video of some sort where you were were you not trying to run games in the CPM mode or something?
Yeah, I'd say I did a video where I was running some games in CPM mode, and yeah, it was the two Zork adventure games, and there was this really basic sort of like Tron Light Cycles game, and yeah, that okay, it's a novelty. It is an arcade game of sorts that's is played in CPM mode, but yeah, it's one of those things where you would look at it once and say, yeah, that'll do.
So see, like games that are like this is so if you put in 128 modes, what does that give you additional abilities that, like some of these games like Morpheus, it was just running in C64 mode, but could it be enhanced from the C64 then, or did you have to run it in 128 mode to get the additional like features or whatever?
I think the games that were like 64 enhanced, those had to be run in in 64 mode. But I know there were some games out there that were run in 128 mode. I mean, 128 mode wasn't really sort of designed with gaming in mind. Some of the like the hardware would be disabled if it was running in 128 mode. Jim's pointing out some of that there. So 128 mode, the processor was running at 2 megahertz, but the VIC chip was disabled then. So yeah, that was not ideal. There were some aspects of the 128 that I always thought could have been improved, and there were bits of it that almost felt a little bit rushed. But it was so late getting to the market that they kind of felt like they had to rush it. If you were to open up a 128 and have a look inside, especially where the Z80 chip is, you've got this huge, great long wire that's like really flimsy sort of like connection there, and you just think, oh, that it doesn't look good, But despite all that, I just think it is such a great 8-bit computer, and for me, it runs away with being the best 8-bit computer that there's ever been.
Yeah. I mean, it could have been and should have been exploited far more, but it came out so late in the day.
Yeah.
I mean, probably a year later, people were moving on to the Atari, and then probably a year later after that, people were playing the Commodore Amiga, and it never got a look in. So it's. Well, I think what we'll do, right? I think we've looked at every machine, we've spoke about it. In your opinion, what is? Well, you've just told us.
Yeah.
In your opinion, what is, if somebody wanted to experience 8-bit games, what computer would you tell them to buy? What is the best 8-bit machine?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Commodore 128, hands down.
People could argue and say, well, I mean, it was a failure, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it was. But if you've got the 128, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if you've got the Commodore 128, you can enjoy everything that the Commodore 64 had to offer. And some, was that pretty much?
Yeah, pretty much. I say there were some games that wouldn't work on it for whatever reason, but they were few and far between. There weren't a vast amount that wouldn't. So you've got the best of both worlds. You've got like your entire, well, more or less your entire Commodore 64 game library, and you also get the chance to sort of dabble into the features that the 128 had. Because I guarantee you there were a lot of 128s that were sold, and the people who had them probably didn't even know that they had some of these features there, like the sprite editor. never. Not only did they never use them, they didn't even know they were there.
That existed. Yeah. I take it these features were. I mean, Commodore 64 manuals were always fucking awful. Was the 128 one? Did that tell you that it had these additional
Yeah,
features?
I mean, the Commodore 128 manual was certainly nowhere near as bad as the 64 manual. And also the basic for the 128 was a hell of a lot better than 64
Oh, right,
basic.
okay, yeah.
So, yeah, it's pretty much like, you got two computers in one.
Yeah, it's just a shame. So it did, apart from like this additional mode, could you know, we'll take something like Uridium, whatever, from a technical point of view, it's beautiful. Could the Commodore 128 have done something even more special? It's like,
Well,
wow.
I'm sure it could have done, but it didn't really get the chance to do so.
No, but it could.
I,
If it
I,
ran for another couple of years, we would have probably seen some games you went, fucking hell.
oh
God,
yeah,
Buzzball, wait till you see this.
yeah. I'm sure it could have done that. Yeah, definitely.
Interesting. Yeah, so it was one of these machines. It just came in. Otherwise, and sorry, Commodore basically fucked it up, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, it was a failure insofar as it didn't sell the numbers that they wanted to, and the only reason it didn't sell is, well, okay, there are two reasons. Firstly, it was fucking expensive, and secondly, it was too late getting to the market. In the metaphorical blink of an eye, after the 128 came along, we had the Atari ST, and suddenly,
Yeah,
those who were like the real computer fanatics, they were going on to 16-bit systems. 8-bit was already, they were looking at it as, oh, it's old hat. You didn't have retro in those days. It was just old hat, and you didn't bother with it.
and you wanted to move on. Exactly. Aye. Okay. Right. My choice. I was obviously going to go for the Commodore 64, but in light of what you've just told me, I would go for the Commodore 128 because it's everything that the C64's got, and it also had additional features. Yeah, and it kind of resembled the Amiga, didn't it? The sort of keyboard. It was a big bastard, eh?
Yeah, it was a nice looking machine. I think it looked every bit as good as the Atari 800 that you had there earlier. So yeah, they even got the aesthetics of the actual machine itself done well.
So, yeah, there you go, folks. That is it. We have answered the question that everyone's been itching to know: what was the best 8-bit? It was the Commodore 128. If you disagree, then you're wrong. Just want to, yeah, I do apologise to everybody watching Ant the Closer. I said to him, max an hour and a half.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, 1.5 hours. Here we are, 3.5 hours later.
you fucking know every time I bring you into the bloody channel. It happens every time. Never learned my lesson. So anyway, listen, thanks to all the diehards that have still got 14 people watching. Fucking hell. Thanks to all the diehards that have watched this in entirety. Slightly different waffle, but it's been good to have Lucosa back again. I've no doubt you're going to see more of him at some point. So it just remains for me to say, I hope you all have a really good weekend. Remember, Date and Diaries, Sunday the 5th of November, we're going to have a really good live stream. Lots of interesting people coming along. And I should be along on Sunday as usual, 7 o'clock till 9 for the live stream. And yeah, good evening, Country Roadist. You're just about to right, quick. Can we ask a question live? You've got 30 seconds. Go. Ask it before we disappear.
I'll get a quick channel plug in that I may be doing a stream myself either Saturday. If it's not Saturday, it'll be Tuesday.
Put a link to Lucosa's. Well, I'll put a link to Lucosa's channel down below once we finish this video. But you probably all know it anyway.
Yeah.
Quick, Country Roadist.
Shock horror. It'll be an Elite Dangerous stream. There you go.
Right. I think Country Roadist has disappeared. Oh, hang on, they go. Right, there we go. You need to rewind. We spoke about that about bloody.
Yeah, it was quite a while ago. Yeah, we covered that. The Amiga pisses over the ST in every way, shape, or form.
Yeah, we summarised it in about 30 seconds. The Amiga was everything the Atari ST was, but much better, apart from the MIDI, which nobody gave a shit about, apart from Fatboy Slim. I think that was about it. So anyway, folks, right, have a nice weekend. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks for the Kozer for joining me. Take care, guys. See you later.